The first sound anyone in Peach Blossom Village heard that morning was me, blowing a funeral horn for a man I'd never met, for 10 copper coins, because I no longer had a house to blow it in, fog on the rice paddies, a rooster somewhere clearly regretting its life choices, and me at the front of the procession in a borrowed blue robe, walking a dead farmer up the mountain on the Suona. If you've never heard a Suona, let me save you the trouble. It's a horn that only knows two moods. It's either sending you up to heaven, or it's marrying you off. There is no third setting. 6 generations of my family blew this exact horn, and the family rule was simple. When the Suona starts, you stop being a person. You become the rhythm, so I became the rhythm. Which was great for the funeral, and terrible for my arms, because this body I was wearing weighed about as much as a wet coat, and had eaten roughly 1.5 meals in its entire recent memory. Here's the part where I explain why a guy with a 6th-generation funeral pedigree is renting himself out to strangers for pocket change. 2.5 days ago, I was not technically in this body. In my last life, I was an ordinary, extremely handsome young man who died the noble death of staying up too late. One second, I'm hunched over a screen at 3 in the morning. The next second, the universe says, lol, no second chances, buddy. And I wake up on a dirt floor as somebody called He Jinglong. And He Jinglong had it rough. His parents got swept away in a flash flood one spring. Bodies never found, which in this village apparently counts as an eviction notice. The Zhao family, our local professional bullies, decided a house with no adults in it was basically a house with their name on it. They moved in. When the original He Jinglong objected, they beat him into the dirt in front of the whole street, and nobody moved, and he died right there on the ground he was born on. That's when I moved in. I opened my eyes in a body that had just been beaten to death on the exact spot where it happened, and my first thought was, cool, very cool. Love that for me. My second thought, walking a stranger's coffin up a mountain 3 days later, was quieter. It was a to-do list, and item 1 on the list had the Zhao family's name on it. I got the coffin to the top, set the rhythm for the burial, and did not let a single soul see that my back was soaked through and my legs were shaking. Only Uncle Hoozy, the old drummer, caught it because Uncle Hoozy catches everything. He didn't say a word. He just looked at me holding that final note steady over the grave, and I watched something go soft and proud in his face. Bearing of an emperor, he muttered to the man next to him. Old. He's got a successor after all. Old He was the previous owner's father. I was wearing his son's face and playing his son's horn, and I let the old man believe what he wanted to believe, because kindness was in short supply, and I wasn't about to argue with it. And then, the second I blew the last note over that fresh grave, a blue screen opened up in the middle of my vision. Now. I'd been dead once already, so I like to think I'm hard to surprise, but a glowing panel hanging in the air over a farmer's coffin will get a reaction out of anybody. Funeral target, it said. Fan Zhen. Occupation farmer. Cultivation, none. Skills, planting, cooking, chopping wood. Attendance rate, 10%. Basic reward, strength +5, life experience +5. Behind the words there was a book. 3 old seal characters on the cover that my new brain somehow read as Burial World Record. And behind the book, way back in the dark, one tiny speck of white light, like a single star at the bottom of a very deep well. Something in me understood, without being told, that the speck of light was an entire world. A small one. Mine. Let me translate what this thing actually was, because the panel makes it sound like paperwork, and it is not paperwork. This was a cheat. My cheat. The rules unpacked themselves in my head like I'd always known them. 1. I was immortal. Not invincible, not unkillable, just immortal in the technical, annoying, fine print sense. I would not die of old age or sickness. I could absolutely still be stabbed, starved, poisoned, or cursed into a fine paste. So let's all keep our expectations reasonable. And 2. The good one. When I send someone off at their funeral, I get to keep a piece of what they were, their strength, their blood and breath, their martial arts, their whole life's work. As long as they were a real person with a real send-off, a slice of them becomes mine. I run funerals for a living. Let me say that again, slowly, so you feel it the way I felt it standing on that mountain. I run funerals for a living, and the system pays me in dead men's lifetimes. I looked at Fan Zhen's little panel, strength +5, and I did not press it. I know. But think about it from my side. I'd been alive in this world for 2.5 days, and I'd already died once in the previous one. I had exactly 0 information about what happens to a body the first time you feed it a stranger's strength. Maybe it's fireworks. Maybe your arm falls off. A wise man does not test the depth of a river by jumping in head first, especially a river he can technically drown in. So I filed it away, closed the panel, collected my 10 coins from the family, and went to lunch with the professionals. Lunch was where I met the rest of my life. The funeral crew ate together after every job, and I, being a starving teenager in a starving body, ate like the food had personally insulted me. Half the table was gone before anyone else picked up their chopsticks. 10 coins, they paid me. Half wage, because I was underage. A grown man carrying the rhythm gets a full share. Fine. 10 coins bought about 10 caddies of sweet potatoes, which is a week of not dying, so I called it a win and pocketed the rest. Then something bumped my leg under the table. Black dog. Skinny, filthy, one ear chewed up, and holding in its mouth a fish so small it was less a fish and more a rumor of a fish. It dropped the fish in my lap and looked up at me, and I swear to you the look on its face was, "Here, I caught this. We're in this together. Don't make it weird." This was Xiaohei. Back when the original He Jinglong was getting beaten into the street, when the whole village found something fascinating to look at in the opposite direction, one creature stayed. This mangy black stray. It curled up next to a dying boy, and it stayed. And when I woke up in that boy's body, the dog was still there, waiting, like it had an appointment. So on the walk down the mountain, I'd done something reckless. My little world, the one behind the book, had a slot in it, a special one. A spot reserved for a divine beast, a companion, the kind of legendary partner cultivators spend 300 years hunting for across 9 continents. And I'd looked at this flea-bitten stray that refused to leave a dead kid, and I'd thought, you know what? The road to immortality is long, and I'd rather not walk it alone. And I put the dog in the god slot. Best decision I made all week. Xiaohei would grow up immortal right alongside me, learn to read, learn to understand every word out of my mouth, and develop opinions. So many opinions. But that's later. For now, he was just a skinny dog who'd caught me a rumor of a fish, and I split my sweet potatoes with him on the floor of a shack that had a rusty wood-cutting knife, a swona, and a jar with a crack in it, because everything else in the house had walked across the street to the Zhao family. I bit into a wild plum from the tree out back. Bitter first, then, right at the end, sweet. After the hardship, they say, comes the sweet part. 100 years from now, I told the dog, scratching his chewed-up ear, we are going to dig up the Zhao family's ancestral graves one generation at a time, and we are going to do it slowly, and we are going to enjoy it. Xiaohei wagged his tail. He was in. That night, alone, I finally opened the panel again and pressed the reward. Because a man can only be cautious for so long when a man is this poor, my own stats floated up first, and they were, frankly, embarrassing. Aptitude, 1. Chi and blood, 3. Strength, 5. No technique. 1 talent, immortality. Doing absolutely nothing for me at the moment. This was the character sheet of a guy the tutorial hasn't finished loading yet. I claimed Fan Zhen. Warmth poured up out of my bones. My strength ticked from 5 to 10, which in this world's units meant my body went from lifting 50 caddies to lifting 100, and every muscle I owned crackled at once like somebody stepped on a field of dry twigs. I felt for the first time since I got here like I might survive the week. I got so excited I grabbed the nearest rock and hurled it into the dark just to feel my new arm work. The rock came down on the one jar I owned. The jar that was also my cooking pot. It exploded beautifully. The universe, once again. LOL. I was still standing there mourning my pot when a knock came at the door, and my whole revenge-fueled bad mood fell apart because kindness in this village came in a very specific shape, and that shape was standing on my step. Uncle Hoosie, holding out a cloth sack. 10 some caddies of brown rice, the good kind, and a burlap bag on top. Old he's gone, he said, gruff, not looking at me. You're what's left of him, so live well. That's an order. And he shoved the rice at me and left before I could say anything, because that's how tough old men love you. They love you, and then they flee the scene. Right behind him, third sister-in-law, with a bowl of dumplings stuffed full of wild vegetables she'd picked herself, which meant they cost her nothing but her whole morning. You're skin and bones, she scolded, like being skin and bones was a thing I was doing on purpose to annoy her. Eat. I stood in my doorway holding rice and dumplings from people who did not have rice and dumplings to spare, and I'll be honest with you, my eyes did a thing. I blinked it away. Then I turned to the dog. New rule, I told him. The people in this village who were kind to a dying boy nobody else would look at, those people are family now. A drop of kindness gets repaid with a fist, and when the Zhao brothers get old and gray and go to collect their pension, we are going to make absolutely sure it comes out, in a timely fashion. Xiaohei wagged his tail. He was, once again, fully in. The next morning brought the third kindness, and this one was the size of a sparrow. Manhwa, Mr. Lin, the schoolteacher's daughter, hair in 2 little pigtails, the kind of face that was clearly planning to be dangerous in about 10 years but for now was just a kid who liked my stories. Her father thought girls shouldn't waste their time reading, so she'd sneak over to hear me talk instead. She'd hauled over a cooking pot and a little jar of rapeseed oil from her dad, because word travels fast in a small village, and everyone had heard the tragic saga of my exploded jar. Then, when she thought no one was looking, this child tried to press her own little coin purse into my hand, her whole savings, for me. I closed her fingers back around it and told her to keep it, in the sternest big brother voice I had, and she pouted like I'd ruined her entire plan, which I had. Let me be clear about Manhwa because it matters later. She was a little sister to me and nothing else, ever, full stop. In a life that would get very complicated, she stayed simple. She was one of the good ones, and I'd have burned the world down before I let anything touch her. Her father came by too, the school teacher Mr. Lin, and he did the thing kind people do where they apologize for other people's crimes. He'd gone to the Zhao family himself, tried to shame them into giving back the house and the land. It hadn't worked, obviously, and he felt personally responsible for that, this gentle old man in a patched scholar's robe who'd never thrown a punch in his life. He offered me free schooling instead, his way of fixing what he couldn't fix. I bowed and thanked him and thought, warmly, sincerely, one day I will pay this family back for every single thing. I also thought, less warmly, when the Zhao elders get old, I am going to break their canes and knock out their dentures. Both things were true. I've always been able to hold two things at once. That night, I learned the last rule of my cheat, and it was the rule that turned a survival tool into a plan. Life experience. That fourth number on my panel, the one I'd been ignoring. It turned out to be fuel. Pour it into a skill, and the skill sharpens. Pour it into my cultivation, and the whole engine climbs. And life experience came from the same place everything else did. The dead. Every send-off filled the tank. My grandfather in this life, it turned out, had been an old mountain hunter. I dropped 3 points of life experience into hunting, and knowledge unfolded in my hands like I'd done it 1,000 times, which, technically, a dead man had, because here was the shape of the whole thing, finally clear, immortal, so I have all the time in the world, a system that turns funerals into power, and a village that, sadly for everybody, has people in it who eventually die. I wasn't the chosen one. I had no golden bloodline, no ancient master, no destined sword waiting in a lake. I had a horn, a dog, a book that ran on the dead, and a very, very long memory. You want to know the first principle I taught that dog, sitting by the fire that night while he pretended to read my grandfather's hunting notes off a flat stone? Patience. We had forever. And forever is a really, really long time to be somebody's problem. The hunting came first because power is nice but calories are non-negotiable. My strength was 10 now, 100 caddies in the arm, which sounds great until you learn that my chi and blood were still trash, which meant I was, in the immortal words of my previous life, a 5-second man. Tremendous burst, no stamina whatsoever. I could throw one glorious punch and then I needed to sit down and think about my choices, so I hunted smart instead of hard. Read the tracks, read the droppings, the stuff my dead grandfather knew in his fingers. Set a snare here, balanced a stone slab deadfall there. Days 1 through 3 gave me nothing but one very flat mountain rat, which, disappointingly, produced no funeral panel at all because a rat is not a person and does not get a send-off. Good to know where the line is. Day 4, the line paid out. A wild deer caught clean in my deadfall. A deer is a fortune when you own a cracked pot and a grudge. The hide alone runs 100 coins in the city, 60 or 70 to a traveling buyer. The antlers, 30 to any doctor. The meat, 1 to 2 months of eating. I hauled it home over my shoulder feeling like the richest man on the mountain, and I cooked heart and lung soup, grilled liver, venison until my body remembered what it was for. I set the grilled liver, the crown jewel, the best piece, down for 1 second to blow on my hands. Xiao He ate the liver, the whole liver, in one motion. Then he looked at me with zero regret, the way only a dog who has just committed a perfect crime can look at you. I did not yell. Yelling is for amateurs. I calmly picked up the entire pot of heart and lung soup, and while maintaining eye contact with my divine beast, I drank all of it. Every drop. Revenge is a dish best served in a pot you don't share. That's a running feud, by the way. It never ends. Note it down. Full and warm for the first time since I arrived, I lay back and let myself dream one honest dream. Not power, not vengeance. Just someday, a real house, good food. And look, I'm only human, maybe 3 or 5 beautiful women and a mahjong table and one long lazy night that never ends. A man's allowed a vision. Then I went to sleep because the vision doesn't come free either. I gave most of the deer away, I know how that sounds. But a drop of kindness gets repaid with a fist, and these people had fed me when I was nothing. So a haunch went to Uncle Huzi, who refused it 3 times on principle and then absolutely kept it. A share to third sister-in-law. And a whole leg to Mr. Lin, the school teacher, because I wanted something from Mr. Lin, and I'm not ashamed to say I greased the wheel with venison. Mr. Lin, being a scholar, could not simply accept a gift. He had to test me first. He sat me down and had me recite, and I gave him the 1,000-character classic and a stretch of the Book of Songs clean off the top of my head, courtesy of a brain that came preloaded with a scholar's education. The old man's eyes lit up. This child, he said to no one, the way teachers do, is teachable. Then he gave me 2 books. The first was a hand-copied Spring and Autumn Annals, a scholar's treasure. The second, and this is the one that mattered, was a slim, worn martial manual, 5 Elements Fist, a cultivation technique, an actual, real, hold it in your hands martial art. Do you understand what that is to a guy whose entire power source is dead farmers? It's the difference between a slingshot and a foundry. And then Mr. Lin gave me the lay of the whole world, which I badly needed, because up to then my understanding of this place was village, mountain, and the Zhao family's front door. There were 9 classes of power, he explained. At the top, the immortals, the cultivators, the ones in the stories. Below them, kings and nobles. Below them, martial artists, men who forged their own bodies into weapons. And below them, mere officials, and everyone else. A martial artist climbed 9 ranks of the acquired stage, then broke into the innate. The first 3 ranks were the muscle realm, tempering flesh, then tendon, then skin. Above that, the blood realm. Above that, divine transformation. And on into thin air where the immortals lived. Then he warned me gently, because he was a gentle man. The Zhao family, he said, has 2 first-rank martial artists in it. Study, child, sit the imperial exams, make something respectable of yourself, and then perhaps, when you are strong in the ways that are safe, think about the rest. I bowed and thanked him for the wisdom. Internally I was thinking, old friend, I am immortal. I do not need the imperial exams. I have all the time in the world, and a martial art in my hands, and a martial artist's strength comes out of his own body, which means with enough patience it only ever goes up. Study for a career? No. I'll just get stronger until the problem solves itself. I did also think fondly, when Mr. Lin got very old, I would make sure his cane never broke and his dentures always fit, because that man was staying on the kindness list forever. See? 2 things at once. The 5 elements fist nearly killed me, and I mean that as a compliment. 5 moves, 1 for each element, chained in the cycle where each feeds the next. White Tiger pounces on the enemy. Xuan Wu guards the north. Beautiful names, brutal execution. Relax the shoulders, sink the elbows, marry the inside to the outside. 3 harmonies, and if you get any of it wrong, the whole thing just doesn't work. 1 full cycle took me 2 or 3 hours, left me dizzy, and actually cost me chi and blood instead of building it, which, it turned out, was the point. There are 3 kinds of martial art, I learned. Training methods that build you up, fighting methods that spend you down, and performance methods that just look pretty. The 5 elements fist was a pure fighting method, yellow rank, low grade. It made you dangerous by burning your own blood and breath as fuel. To advance it the honest way, you needed a river of life chi, expensive herbs, and mountains of meat forever. The poor study books, they say, and the rich study martial arts. I was neither. I was something the saying didn't cover. I dropped 2 points of life experience into the 5 elements fist. The manual rewrote itself in my head. 2 hours of fumbling collapsed into understanding. The fist went from complete beginner to something I could actually throw. Then I ate 5 or 6 caddies of venison to put back the blood the practice had cost me, lay down next to my ridiculous immortal dog, and grinned at the dark. The rich advanced their fists with herbs and thyme. I was going to advance mine with dead people and a horn. Let's see whose method was faster. The village doctor died a month later, and I have never in my life been so respectfully, so quietly thrilled by a natural death. Old Zhao Langjong, 60-something beloved, went to sleep one night and simply didn't wake up, which is honestly the dream. A good man gets a good funeral, so this was a 3-day affair, and 3 days of me on the horn earned 15 coins, 50% over my first job. I was moving up in the death economy, but the coins weren't the prize. The panel was. Old Zhao had been a doctor for 40 years, and 40 years of being loved by a whole village does something to the numbers. Attendance rate, 57%. And the moment that number crossed 50, a second line appeared under the basic reward that hadn't been there for the farmer. An optional reward, a choice. I could take Old Zhao's actual medical arts, 40 years of healing in 1 download, or I could take something called an essence-nourishing formula, a recipe, a tonic that builds up a man's qi, blood, and essence. The kind of thing that, and I'm quoting the old doctor's own sales pitch that surfaced with it, keeps a gentleman's spear from ever drooping in battle. I took the recipe. I want you to understand the calculation there, because it's the whole game in 1 move. Medical skill makes me a doctor. A recipe I can cook with 10-year ginseng and deer antler and a common root, ingredients I could actually get my hands on, makes me a business. And a business makes me money, and money buys meat and meat and herbs feed the fist. The medical arts were a gift. The recipe was an engine. Then I claimed the basic reward, and my body finished loading the tutorial. I coughed up a mouthful of black blood, the bad stuff, years of a starved boy's weakness leaving all at once. And when it was done, the deep hollow ache that had lived under my ribs since the day I woke up here was simply gone. I poured 8 points of life experience into the fist, and it ranked up on the spot, from something I could throw to something I actually understood. My aptitude jumped by 2. And somewhere in the middle of all that, my body crossed a line it had been leaning against for weeks. First-tier body refinement. The flesh-tempering realm. I was, officially, a martial artist now. The lowest possible rung of it, sure, the participation trophy of the martial world, but a real one, with a real body underneath it, and a normal man at this stage tops out lifting 300 caddies. 2.5 weeks earlier, I'd been a corpse. Now I was a martial artist with a business plan and a grudge. I lay back in my leaky shack and I thought, the Zhao family has 2 first-rank martial artists. I am first tier. The gap is real, but the gap is not the point. The point is which direction each of us is moving and how much time each of us has. They were as strong as they were ever going to get. I had forever, and a horn, and then the years happened. I want to slow down here because this next part is the part people rush, and rushing it is a crime. The revenge is the loud thing. This is the true thing. I stayed. I farmed a little, hunted a lot, cooked my tonic, and sold it quiet. And every single day, no matter what, I ran the 5 elements fist until my blood ran out, and then I ate until it came back. The plum pit I'd planted with the dog on my first night cracked the soil, then reached my knee, then my shoulder, then it was a tree, and one spring it bloomed, and the whole yard went pink and white and smelled like the only good thing that ever happened here, and I played the horn for everyone. That was the deal I made with myself, and the village never knew about. Every wedding, I marched the bride. Every funeral, I walked the dead. Every son who left to seek his fortune, I blew a send-off at the village gate so he'd carry the sound of home in his ears down the road. The Suona has 2 settings, heaven and marriage, and over the years I played this village into and out of both, again and again and again. Manhwa got married. The little girl with the pigtails who used to sneak over to hear my stories, who once tried to give me her entire coin purse, put on a red veil, and I walked her out of the village on the horn, and she was happy, and I was happy for her, and if the note wobbled once in the middle, nobody said anything about it. She'd called me Brother Jinglong her whole childhood. Now she was somebody's wife with her own road ahead, and that's how it's supposed to go. That's the whole point of protecting someone. They get to grow up and leave you behind and be fine. I held the note steady. 5 years after the plum tree first bore fruit, Mr. Lin died. The gentle old schoolteacher who tested me on the classics and slipped me a martial manual and apologized for crimes that weren't his. He'd never thrown a punch in his life. And the second he was in the ground, a pack of local ruffians came sniffing around his little estate, figuring a dead scholar's family was easy pickings, the same math the Zhao family once did on a dead boy's house. I ran his funeral, and then, on the way back down from the grave, still in my funeral robes, I met those ruffians on the road, and I explained the situation to them with my fists, gently, the way Mr. Lin would have wanted, if Mr. Lin had ever wanted anything with his fists, which he hadn't, which was exactly the problem I was there to correct. They did not come back. His family kept their home. Before he died, the old man had pressed 2 last things into my hands, his own life's work, a book he called Lin's Herbal Classic, and a sealed letter addressed to his finest student, a young man named Ho Bo who'd gone off years ago to make his name in the city of Zhangcheng. If you ever go to the city, Mr. Lin said, already fading, find Ho Bo, give him the letter, and carry the book somewhere it can do some good. I promised. I keep my promises. Remember the book. And then there was third sister-in-law. Her son, Mo Bauer, grew up and left to make his way in the world, the way sons do, and I blew him out the village gate like all the others, and she waited for him. That's the whole story, really. She waited. She stood at the entrance to the village at the end of every day, looking down the road he'd walked away on, and she waited for him to come back, season after season, and her hair went from black to gray to white while she did it, and he did not come back. One winter the snow came down heavy and wet, the kind that piles up silent and patient on every branch until the branch can't hold it. A limb off a plum tree at the village edge finally gave, all at once, the way patient things do, and it came down on an old woman standing in the cold, looking down an empty road. I played her funeral. I did not undercut that one with a joke, and I'm not going to undercut it now. Some sounds a horn makes aren't for heaven or for weddings. Some are just for saying, I saw you. You were kind to a dying boy nobody else would look at, and I saw you, and I will not forget. By the time I'd buried all of them, 20-some years had gone by, and something strange had started to happen, which is that nobody else was aging, and I was. My aptitude sat at 5, my flesh tempering was 97% of the way to full, and my face was exactly the same as the day I woke up in it. Children I'd walked to their weddings now had children. Uncle Huzi's hands shook too badly for the drum, so I'd taught the rhythm to his son Shi Tu and handed the family horn down a generation that wasn't even mine. Jinglong, an old woman asked me once, squinting, why do you never get old? Because, I told her perfectly serious, I never meddle in other people's business. She accepted that. People will accept almost anything if you say it flatly enough. 20 years. I'd buried nearly everyone who was ever kind to me, gotten strong in the quiet, and waited, because waiting was the one thing I was truly built for. And now the to-do list I'd written in my head on my very first morning walking a stranger's coffin up a mountain, had exactly one item left on it. I looked at Xiaohei, who was now a large, glossy, suspiciously intelligent black dog with a little notebook he refused to explain. The Avengers, I said, are back in town. I did my homework first, because I'm not an animal. Before I touched the Zhao family, I spent a while learning them all the way down. Their habits, their debts, their 2 first-rank martial artists, and, because I'm thorough, and I'd made a promise to a dog on night 1, the exact location of their ancestral graves going back 18 generations. You don't declare war on a family, you audit them. Then I put on my funeral gear, the full kit. And I walked up to the Zhao family's front gate, the gate of the house that used to be mine, and I lifted the horn and I played them a dirge, a funeral song, for a house full of very much living people. That got their attention. A Zhao grandkid was doing his lessons out front. I walked over and calmly tore his homework in half. Petty? Deeply. 20 years earned me a little petty. The boy's grandfather, the Zhao family's 3rd son, now an old man, came charging out swinging his cane and screaming about respect, and I caught the cane and snapped it over one knee and set him down on the ground with an open palm, not hard enough to break him, just hard enough to make a point. Careful, old man, I said, as coins spilled out of my sleeve and scattered across his courtyard. I've got a gold coin drop. That's when the 2 first-rank martial artists came out. The Zhao 4th and 5th sons, both past 60 now, both still dangerous. The 2 men Mr. Lin had warned me about all those years ago, like they were the ceiling of the world. The 4th son came in fast. I stepped into white tiger pounces on the enemy, the move I'd thrown 10,000 times against empty air on a mountain nobody watched, and I put him down. 1 exchange. The 5th son roared and came with an iron horse charge, all that old school power, and I met it with Xuanwu guards the north, took the charge on a braced guard, felt 20 years of practice hold like a wall, and then I put my foot into him and put him down next to his brother. The 2 first-rank martial artists of the Zhao family, the terror of my youth, the reason a gentle school teacher told me to give up and study for a safer life. Both down. And here is where I keep my promise to you about how this gets told, because they were old men, and they had spent their whole lives being the strongest thing in a very small pond. And when that pond finally met something bigger, they did not get up again. That's all. They didn't get up. The rest of the Zhao family got the full experience. I took the compound apart. I chased the grown men off their own porch. I ran the bullies out into the fields. And yes, I found time to pour hot water down the ant nests in their yard, because some grudges are strategic and some are just for me. Their prize plum tree, the one they'd planted in the front yard to show off, I snapped clean in half. Funny, I told it on the way down. You grow the same plums as mine. Shame about the difference in who owns you. And I went up the mountain and I dug up 18 generations of Zhao ancestors, exactly like I'd promised a skinny stray on night 1, and I gave those old bones back the dignity of a real burial somewhere far away from the family that had traded on their name to steal a dead boy's house. Whatever you're picturing, make it cleaner and quieter than that. I'm a funeral man. I don't desecrate the dead. I relocate them with a horn, which for the Zhao family was somehow worse. Then I came back down and I burned the old house. My house. The one they'd been living in for 20 years. And when it was down to embers, I stood there and did something I hadn't let myself do the whole time. I said goodbye to the boy whose body I was wearing. He Jinglong, I said to the fire, to the kid who got beaten into this dirt while the whole street looked away. Our karma is finished. The house is settled. The people who did it have been dealt with slowly, the way I promised. You can go now. Rest. And I laughed, and I cried, and I want to tell you what happened next because it's the only supernatural thing in this whole revenge, and I didn't expect it. Something in my head that had always been a little foggy, a faint pane of glass between me and the world since the day I transmigrated, just wiped clean. From that moment there was no more He Jinglong and no more borrowed grief, just me. He Han. Clear all the way through. Like I'd been driving with a fogged windshield for 20 years and someone finally reached over and cleaned it. I left the land deeds and every extorted coin the Zhao family had ever squeezed out of anyone on the doorsteps of the people they'd squeezed. The village would finish what I started with the Chens. They didn't need me for the paperwork. I had somewhere to be. Last stop, Mr. Lin's grave. I burned paper for the old school teacher and I played him the song called Farewell, the one you only play when someone's leaving for good, and I told him I still had his book and his letter, and that I was finally going to the city to keep the promise. The herbal classic, Hobo, Jiangqing. I patted the pocket where the book sat, to make sure. The plum tree in the yard I'd planted the first night was in full bloom. The blossoms came down like the world's slowest, softest snow. I whistled, and my ridiculous immortal dog trotted up with his notebook, and the two of us walked out of Peach Blossom Village and into the sunrise toward a city I'd never seen, with a horn on my back and a whole world of funerals in front of me. 20 years to close one chapter. I told you I was patient, and I was just getting started. Zhangcheng hit me like a wall of noise. After 20 years of a village where the biggest daily event was a chicken having an opinion, the city was almost violent. It was a county seat, one of the largest cities in the whole southern reach of the Mo Kingdom, and I walked in through the dawn fog past meat bun stalls and a street performer doing the face-changing trick, whipping painted masks off his own face faster than the eye could follow, then breathing a gout of fire over the crowd for coins. Not bad, I told Xiaohei, who was pretending to be a normal dog. Still can't hold a candle to Zhuang's mom, but not bad. I had a whole plan for finding work, and the plan was something with a horn. I know one trade, but the city wall was papered with job postings, and one of them stopped me cold and rewrote my entire strategy on the spot. Mortuary, South City, seeking 5 laborers, strong, bold, meticulous. Let me explain to you what a mortuary is in this world, because when I read it, angels sang. The mortuary is the official house of the dead. Every unclaimed body, every casualty, every corpse the prefectural governor's office or one of the great families needs handled comes through the mortuary, which means the mortuary is a building where dead people are delivered to you. In bulk, all day, with paperwork. Do you understand what that is to a man whose superpower is funerals? That's not a job posting. That's an all-you-can-eat sign hung on the one restaurant I'm allowed to eat at. Hundreds of people wanted those 5 spots because a stable government wage is a stable government wage even if it comes with corpses. We lined up in the yard, and 2 men ran the hiring. The first was manager He, a steward built like a small mountain of pork who clearly considered walking to be cardio. The second, standing quiet behind him, was a lean Taoist in a worn robe with eyes that missed nothing. Taoist Kuiji, the mortuary's exorcist, the man they kept on staff to make sure the dead stayed dead. File that name away. That man was about to matter more to me than almost anyone. Spot number 1 went instantly to a young man in white. No test, no sweat, on pure connection. My advantage, he announced to the yard, is my second maternal uncle, Officer Zhao. Ah, the eternal martial art of having a relative. Spots 2, 3, and 4 went the same way, quietly, to a rich man's brother-in-law with a fat envelope, a Zhao family cousin, a retired martial instructor with friends inside. 4 spots, 4 handshakes, 0 corpses lifted, which left 1 spot, and Taoist Kuiji finally spoke up, and I liked him immediately. The last one, he said flat, is going to be someone who will actually do the work. We have enough nephews. My competition for the working spot was a huge man flexing like the corpses would be impressed, and a guy demonstrating his sincerity by kissing a skull. I did neither. I took the Suona off my back and I played them the grand funeral. It's the big one. The full requiem, and I'd been playing it over real grief for 20 years, so I didn't play notes. I played the thing underneath the notes. Halfway through, the flexing man had stopped flexing, the skull kisser had put the skull down, and I hit the line the way my family always hit it, the line that says, if the Suona sounds and you feel nothing, then your parents raised you for nothing. Kuiji's eyes changed. Sorrowful, he said softly, almost to himself, yet not tragic. There's soothing in it. Under the grief, there's peace. He looked at me like he'd found something he'd been missing. This boy was born for this. Manager. He gave me the spot on the spot, and I want to be honest about why, because it wasn't my artistry. It was that he wanted to make Kuiji happy, so Kuiji would keep covering for him while he spent his afternoons at the Chunfeng Tower, which is a place you go to appreciate music and companionship and definitely nothing else. My genius Suona and his brothel habit, working together, that's the system. Embrace it. The reveal came once I was inside, courtesy of a chatty coworker named Gao Hai, who befriended me in about 4 minutes and knew everything about everyone. The mortuary officially had 56 positions. 6 people actually showed up. The other 50 collected a wage for existing. The ones who manage, Gao Hai summarized cheerfully, do nothing. The ones who do things get nothing. Meanwhile, manager, he's pockmarked nephew, an oily little extortionist everyone called shameless. He shook me down for 200 coins before he'd let me have bedding in a room. Welcome to the working world. None of it bothered me. I hadn't come for the wage. I'd come for the deliveries. The working crew turned out to be a real crew. Gao Hai, who knew everything. A 16-year-old named Erlong, 2 meters of solid muscle wrapped around the soul of a boy who desperately wanted to be a hero out of a storybook. And old Mo, a lame, permanently half-drunk body collector with the bleakest, most accurate mouth I have ever heard on a human being. The work was simple. Bodies came in. Kuiju chanted the proper rites over them so nothing woke up that shouldn't. And then we carried them to the mass grave on the back mountain and put them in the ground. Erlang, being 16 and lazy, immediately dumped all the digging and hauling on the new guy, me. He thought he was pulling one over on me. I could have kissed him. Every body I personally buried was a funeral, and every funeral over 50% attendance unlocked an optional reward. He was handing me the buffet and congratulating himself for getting out of dishes. The first two send-offs were quiet and sad and small. A nameless, thin young man nobody came for, a child who'd starved. Little rewards, a point of strength, a point of blood, the leftovers of short, hard lives. I buried them properly anyway, with the horn, because they'd had no one, and now they had me, and that counts for something even when it's too late to matter. The third body taught me a lesson I did not enjoy learning. Shule. Attendance somehow 65%, which for a stranger meant he'd been known and briefly loved, and recently. His panel was good. Chi and blood plus 15, and an optional reward of real martial arts, a flying spirit palm, and a soul-severing blade technique. But the system does more than hand me numbers. When I send someone off, for a moment, I get their life, and Shulei's life was a mirror, and I did not like my reflection. He was a poor mountain boy. He'd found the legacy of some dead martial artist, a broken half of a palm technique, and clawed his way to first rank on it, alone, on nothing. And then, strong and hungry and sure the world owed him, he'd rushed to the big city to make his name. He'd run out of food. He'd borrowed money from the Black Wolf Gang at the kind of interest rate designed to never be paid off. And to service the debt, he'd become a blade for hire, a leg breaker, and within 1 month of walking through the gate I'd walked through that morning, the Divine Strength sect put him in the ground. Poor mountain boy. Dead master's legacy. One good technique. Big dreams. Big city. Dead in a month. Change 3 details, and that's my file, isn't it? I stood over Shulei a long moment. Then I bowed to him honestly. Brother Lei, I said. Rest easy. I heard you. And I took his soul-severing blade, because I'm not sentimental enough to leave a good knife technique in the ground, and I promised the both of us I'd be smarter than the story we shared. I also, right then, quietly relieved Erlang of all future digging duty and claimed every single funeral for myself, permanently. Erlang was baffled that the new guy wanted the worst job in the building, then delighted, then, being Erlang, immediately guilty about being delighted. What a mess I've made of things, he moaned, and slapped himself across the face. I deserve to die. He did that a lot. Slapped himself, declared he deserved to die, then cheered up completely. I grew very fond of it. The next day, I bought scallion noodles for the whole crew from a stall run by an Aunt Mo on Yangliu Street, and just like that, I was one of them. It's not complicated, buying your way into people's hearts one bowl of noodles at a time. It's just cheaper than everyone thinks. At night, I practiced the soul-severing blade in the dark, while Xiaohei sat on a stool studying the herbal classic, which he was not supposed to be able to read, and pretended he wasn't when I looked over. The blade came along fast, a clean cut through a log as thick as my fist by the end of the week, and then a young man named Gu Wen brought his mother in, and I got a chance to be on the right side of the mirror for once. He was lean and quiet and clearly out of money, and Gao Hai, who handled intake and was not cruel exactly but was employed by Shameless He, squeezed him for 46 coins to bury her. Gu Wen paid it. It was, I could tell, all of it, everything he had in the world spent on a hole in the ground for the last person who loved him. He buried her. Attendance 37%. A quiet small mother, a quiet small reward. And then he walked off, and something about the set of his shoulders made me hand my shovel to Erlang and follow him. I found him at the edge of the burial ground, under a tree, doing the math a person does when the math has run out. Both parents gone, not a coin left. Nobody, nowhere, nothing. I didn't make a speech. Speeches are for people who have time. I just walked up like I'd been looking for him and pressed 20 coins into his hand. The mortuary overcharged you, I said. Clerical error. This is yours back. It wasn't, and we both knew it wasn't, and that was the kindness, letting him take it as a refund instead of a rescue so he could keep his spine. He stared at the coins, then at me, and something in him decided, right there, not to be under that tree anymore. He gripped my hand hard. I'll remember this, he said. I'll pay it back if it takes my whole life. And he told me he was going to Jimming Mountain, where they said real immortals sometimes took disciples, to try for something bigger than a debt and a grave. I told him to go. I meant it. Watching him walk off toward the mountains, alive, I felt Xiaohei lean against my leg, and I answered the question the dog was too polite to ask. Not yet, I said. Immortals, cultivators, all of that. It's up there, and it's real, and it's coming for us eventually. But we don't touch it yet. We get strong the boring way first, in the mud, where the stakes are small, and the mistakes don't kill you. Shulei ran up the mountain hungry, and it ate him in a month. We're not doing that. We build the base. We wait. The dog looked up the road after Gu Wen, then back at me, and I could have sworn he approved. That night, the soul-severing blade clicked over into real beginner mastery, 3 cuts landing where I used to land one. Down in the mud, where the mistakes don't kill you, getting stronger the boring way, exactly according to plan. I let Taoist Kuiji find out I was a martial artist on purpose. A first-tier flesh-tempering nobody, sure, the martial equivalent of a learner's permit. But in a building full of ordinary clerks, even that made me useful, and a useful man gets treated better and learns more. So I let it slip, and Kuiji, who noticed everything, immediately asked to see my technique. He watched me run the 5 elements fist once and shook his head like a mechanic looking under a hood at something held together with hope. This fist is drinking your blood, he said. It only knows how to spend. No wonder you eat like a plague. It's a fighting method with no training method behind it. Yellow rank, low grade, serviceable, cheap. He told me the real version, the complete 5 elements fist, yellow rank high grade, existed, and you could find one on the black market for a few dozen taels of silver if you knew where to look. Then he taught me how the whole ladder was labeled, which I'd never had straight before. Techniques come in 4 ranks, he said. Heaven, earth, black, and yellow. Worst to best going up, each split into upper, middle, and lower. And bodies climb their own ladder. The muscle realm first, flesh, then tendon, then skin, my neighborhood, then the blood realm above it, then divine transformation, and up past all of it, grandmaster, great-grandmaster, martial god, and at the very top, thin as air, the martial saint. I nodded along like a good student. Inside, I was doing arithmetic, and the arithmetic had a rule in it, and I said the rule out loud to Xiaohei that night because a plan you can't explain to your dog isn't a plan. First principle for immortals like us, I told him. We always punch above our weight. Always. 1 rank up minimum, 2 if we can survive it. A guy my level who fights guys my level lives a normal little life and dies on schedule. But a guy my level who can put down someone 2 tiers up, that guy's numbers don't add up, and a man whose numbers don't add up is a man nobody can predict, and a man nobody can predict is very, very hard to kill. We don't fight fair. We fight up. The dog wrote something in his notebook. I've stopped asking. Payday came, and Payday got robbed twice, which is efficient. The first robbery was legal. 100 coins a month was the wage. I got 50 because shameless he withheld half of every new hire's pay for the first 6 months, for reasons that were never explained and never needed to be. Fine, 50 coins. The second robbery walked in the front door on 2 legs. The Black Wolf Gang ran protection on the whole South City, and their collector came through the mortuary like he owned the deed. A big man, 1 eye, a scraggly beard, and skin with a faint gold sheen to it. 3rd-tier skin tempering, which made him the strongest thing in the room by a mile and eager for everyone to know it. Master fan. Second master fan, if you were feeling generous, which nobody was. 50 coins a head, protection fee, non-negotiable. My entire monthly pay, gone into his palm, with a smile I had to keep on my face the whole time. A moment's patience, I reminded myself, which is a thing I say a lot. We immortals don't sweat a temporary loss. And I opened Xiaohei's little revenge black book in my head, and I wrote down the name Fan right under the Zhao family in the ledger that never closes. Then Fan did the thing loan sharks do. He got warm. He put a heavy arm around my shoulders and told me that if I was ever short, if I ever needed a little something to get a business going, the Black Wolf Gang was always happy to help a hard-working young man. Very generous terms, he said. 100% return rate. He said it like it was a benefit. It was. For him. He also, before he left, played the good son loudly for the room, going on about his sainted old mother and his filial devotion, and everyone nodded because everyone was scared. Everyone except old Mo, the lame drunk, who waited until the door closed and then took the man apart in about 4 sentences. Fan lost that eye stealing chickens, not defending anyone's honor, and the mother he wept about so beautifully, he'd broken her leg himself, over money. There are no good men in the Zhonghu, old Mo told the ceiling, sipping his wine. Every hero in every story is just a robber with a good publicist. Steal 100 taels, toss 2 or 3 to a beggar in the street, and the storytellers do the rest. Erlong, our resident hero worshipper, went red and shook and started to stand up, ready to go correct the record with his enormous fists, and I got an arm around him and held him down. Not him, I said quietly into the kid's ear. Not yet. Killing 1 fan doesn't fix anything. The whole Black Wolf Gang is the problem, and you don't cut down a tree by yelling at 1 leaf. Endure. Write it down. When they're weak, that's the day. Erlong settled. Barely. He was going to be a problem. That big soft heart in that big hard body. I already knew it. I needed 5 taels of silver to start my tonic business, and I had, after both robberies, roughly nothing. So when the biggest funeral in months landed in our laps, I wanted it badly. Master Mo's son had died. Master Mo being the richest man in the East City, the mortuary's single most important patron, which meant the payout was going to be enormous. And suddenly, all 56 of our phantom employees materialized out of thin air to line up for their cut. Steward's share, 5 taels. Assistant's share, 1 tael. A servant's share, 200 coins, and Mo wanted a proper Swana team for the procession, and a good enough performance on the horn could pull 5 taels, and more importantly to me, a rich young martial artist's funeral reward. I stepped up for the horn, and shameless, he handed it instead to Dong An. Dong An had once been the mortuary's chief Swana player, famous across the city for a piece called 100 Birds Pay Homage to the Phoenix, the hardest thing in the repertoire. That was years ago. Now he was a drunk with a network of old connections and shaking hands, and he owed one of those connections a favor, so the spot was his, and when I opened my mouth, he threatened my job to close it. So I backed off. I watched instead. I watched Dong An's hands tremble as he lifted the horn, watched the broken blood vessels in his cheeks, watched a man whose breath control had drowned in a wine jar years ago. And I said nothing, and I got cold and patient and ready, because a man who reads the room correctly rarely has to fight for a seat. Sometimes the seat just opens up. The seat opened up spectacularly. The Mo funeral was a monster. 100-foot cortege, a coffin of solid Nanmu wood worth more than my whole village, 16 bearers in white, and the boy himself, Mo Tian, 16 years old, laid out handsome as a painting, with his eyes open, wide open, refusing, for whatever reason, to close. Dong An started strong. He'd been great once, and greatness leaves fingerprints. For about 30 seconds, the old phoenix flew again, and the crowd leaned in. And then, right in the heart of the right, in front of the richest man in the city, and half the notables of Zhongcheng, Dong An coughed, a wet, ruined sound, and collapsed. The horn hit the ground. The music died, and a solemn funeral turned, instantly, into chaos. Master Mo went from grief to fury in one breath, because grief has nowhere to go, and fury does. He had Dong An dragged up and beaten. He slapped Shameless. He across the face for arranging it. Manager. He, terrified, beat his own nephew bloody to get ahead of the blame, a full mountain of pork wailing on a smaller mountain of pork while the mourners stared. And Mo, spit flying, swore he'd report the entire mortuary to the prefect and have every last one of us thrown out on the street. 56 jobs, phantom and real, about to evaporate over one drunk's failed breath. I picked up the fallen horn. I didn't ask permission. There wasn't time, and there wasn't a point. I put the Swana to my lips, and I did the thing I'd done for 20 years over real graves, the thing Quiji had heard in the hiring yard, the thing under the notes. I didn't play louder than the chaos. I played underneath it, that low, sorrowful current that isn't quite tragic, that has peace folded into the grief, and I watched it work its way across the courtyard the way it always did. The shouting dropped to muttering. The muttering dropped to silence. Master Mo's raised hand came down to his side. Even Manager He stopped hitting his nephew, which was frankly the biggest miracle of the day. Quiji, at the edge of the crowd, gave me one small nod, the kind of nod that's worth more than money, and Master Mo, red-eyed, staring at the boy playing his son to the grave, said, in a voice gone quiet and dangerous, "Finish the funeral. Then you and I will settle accounts." I couldn't tell yet if that meant a reward or a beating. But while I played, the panel had opened, and the panel did not care about Master Mo's mood in the slightest. Mo Tian, young master, age 16, cultivation, 3rd rank martial artist, attendance rate 5%, basic reward, chi and blood plus 25, life experience plus 151, and a long menu of glittering optional techniques hanging just underneath, all of them grayed out, all of them locked because the attendance was 5%, and the door to the good stuff only opens at 50. A 3rd rank martial artist, the biggest single meal I'd ever been offered, and the boy had died with his eyes open and refused to close them, and 5% of the city had bothered to mourn a rich kid nobody actually liked, and I was standing there with a horn and a problem. 50%. I needed to move the grief in that courtyard from 5% to 50. On a boy the crowd was only pretending to mourn, or the whole feast stayed behind glass. Good thing moving grief is the one thing I'm better at than anyone alive. Here's why the boy's eyes wouldn't close. The system gave me his life while I played, and it was a familiar tragedy in a nicer coat. Mo Tian had been the real thing, a literary prodigy who then turned out to be a martial prodigy too. 3rd rank in 2 years, the pride of a rich house, the kind of kid the whole city expected great things from. And it wasn't enough for him. He wanted to break past 3rd rank right now, so he tried to force several techniques together at once, jam them into one body by willpower, and the techniques had fought each other instead of fusing, and his own heart had stopped in the crossfire. He died mid-tantrum, raging at the ceiling. "I'm not reconciled. I will be the overlord of the martial forest." That rage was still in him. That's what was holding the eyes open. Not a curse, not a ghost. Just a boy who died furious and couldn't put it down. So I stopped playing to the crowd, and I played to him. I had 20 years of watching people die. Kind people, patient people, people who waited by a road until the snow took them. I knew something. Mo Tian had died too young and too angry to learn, which is that all of it goes. All the splendor, all the ambition, the overlord of the martial forest and the beggar under the bridge, all of it comes down in the end to the same handful of dust, and there is a strange, terrible peace in that if you can just stop fighting it long enough to feel it. I put all 20 of those years into the horn, and I gave it to the furious boy in the coffin, and I told him without words, because the horn doesn't use words, you can stop now, it's over, let it go. Something moved in the sound. I felt it happen, a weight settling into the music that had never been fully there before, a kind of intent riding on top of the notes, soul-soothing, the concept of it, the actual thing, not just the imitation. And in the coffin, slowly, Mo Tian's eyes drifted closed. The courtyard made a single sound, 100 people inhaling at once. A corpse with its eyes locked open, in front of the whole grieving city, gently shut them while a boy played a horn. Master Mo started crying, really crying this time, not the performance of grief, but the thing itself. Kuiji stared at me like I'd grown a second head, a good second head, an interesting one. And Dong An, the drunk I'd replaced, beaten and bleeding and propped against a pillar, whispered the thing that mattered most. Divine intent. That's divine intent in the sound. 30 years I chased the phoenix and I never once touched it. The grief in that courtyard went real, all at once, and I watched the attendance number climb and climb, 5, 20, 40, past 50, and the locked menu of glittering techniques underneath the panel lit up gold. Master Mo, wet-faced, pressed 20 taels of silver into my hands and 5 taels to each of the other musicians and gripped my wrist and would not let go. I had my seed money in a single afternoon, but the money was the small prize, and I knew it, because attendance had opened one door and I could feel satisfaction, the second number, still climbing toward the second. It crossed. 69% attendance, 77% satisfaction. 2 doors open, 2 optional rewards, from a menu that would have made a young master weep. Dragon subduing palm, overlord fist, 13 flying cloud swords, techniques that could have turned me into a walking weapon overnight. I didn't take any of them. I took a lightness technique called Lingshu Step, soaring void, yellow rank middle grade, for getting places fast and leaving them faster. And I took something called Xuan Turtle Breath Concealing, yellow rank high grade, a technique whose entire purpose is to hide, to pull your aura down inside your skin and make a strong man read as a weak one, a martial artist read as a clerk. Xiaohei gave me a look, the look that means you had Overlord Fist right there and you took the invisibility cloak. An immortal, I told him, has to be able to do 2 things above all others: run away and hide his cards. Overlord Fist wins you 1 fight and paints a target on your back for the next 10. This, I patted my own chest where the concealment technique now lived, wins me every fight I never have to be in. We're not here to be the strongest man in the room, Xiaohei. We're here to be the man nobody in the room notices, right up until it's far too late. My panel after the whole feast read, Aptitude 5, Qi and Blood 56, Strength 62, Tendon Forging Realm, with a fat 300 points of life experience banked in reserve, untouched, waiting. I was, quietly, one of the stronger young men in the South City now. Nobody knew it, which was the entire point. Master Mo toasted me personally at the funeral banquet in front of everyone and gave me a nickname that stuck to me for years. He the Soul Soother, the boy who closed his son's eyes. The crippled Dong An cornered me afterward, half convinced I'd cheated somehow, that no one that young could carry divine intent. I didn't argue. I just told him, quietly, the truth about his own body, the hollowed lungs, the drowned breath, the years of wine where the phoenix used to live. He went pale. Then he poured out his wine jar into the gutter, right there, and swore off it. I hope it took. Some send-offs are for the living. And then, because the universe is consistent if it is nothing else, Manager He and Shameless, he got their hands on Master Mo's 20 taels before it fully reached mine and skimmed it, layer by greasy layer, down to 5. 20 became 5 in the time it took to walk down a hallway. I didn't say a word. I just added Manager He to the black book, right there under Fan, in the ledger that never closes, and I reminded myself of the rule. Endure. Record. Back down now, dig up the grave later. The list is long, and I am immortal, and the list always gets paid. 5 taels though. 5 taels was exactly the seed money I'd needed all along. So I went shopping for the future. First stop, out of pure academic curiosity, was the Chunfeng Tower, the famous house of music and companionship, where I stood across the street and academically appreciated the ladies on the upper balcony from a respectful and affordable distance of very far away. A man can window shop, then, business, The Jishatang Pharmacy, for the ingredients to my essence-nourishing formula, the tonic that keeps a gentleman's spear from drooping in battle, where I learned that the traveling peddler back home had been robbing me blind for years, charging 2 taels for ginseng that cost 1 in the city. Everyone overcharges the man from the village. Nobody overcharges the man who checks. I bought my ingredients at real prices, and I bought one more thing, a precision steel yard, a good scale, because the whole trick of a tonic business is consistency, and consistency is just weighing things correctly every single time. That night, I brewed my first real batch in the city, properly measured, properly sourced, and it came out clean and strong, miles better than the muddy stuff I'd sold back home. I had a product, I had 5 taels of runway, and I had a growing list of names in a dog's notebook, none of them crossed off yet. The boring way, in the mud, where the mistakes don't kill you, building. With the Lingshu step under me, I could go up a tree without rustling a leaf and drop off a wall without a sound. And with the Zhuan turtle technique, I could stand next to a real martial artist and read as a delivery boy. Put those two together and you get a very specific kind of person. The kind who can walk into places he shouldn't and walk back out before anyone remembers he was there. So I put on a cloak and a mask and I went to the one place in Zhongcheng where a man like that belongs. The black market. It sat in a valley outside the city, run by the Zhao family, and to understand the Zhao family, you have to understand the whole board, which I finally got laid out for me here. Zhongcheng ran on 4 great families, the Liu, the Zhao, the Xiao, and the An, old money with real martial artists behind the walls, and under them, fighting over the streets, 3 gangs, the Black Wolf Gang, who'd robbed my paycheck, the Divine Strength Sect, who'd killed Shulei, and the Money Gang, who were exactly as subtle as they sound. That was the water I was swimming in. 4 sharks and 3 swarms of piranha, and me, a minnow with a horn and a very long memory. The black market made the pecking order clear at the door, where a row of mummified corpses hung nailed to the wall as a friendly reminder of the house rules, watched over by a bald guard, radiating enough chi and blood to end me by accident. 5 coins to enter, 10 to set up a stall. Inside, refined steel blades that sheared through iron like it was bean curd. And there, on a rack, the thing I'd come hoping for, a complete 5 spirits fist manual, high grade, priced at 50 taels of silver. I had, after buying my ingredients, nowhere near 50 taels. I looked at it the way you look at a house you can't afford, and I moved on. I paid my 10 coins and set up a stall, 10 little paper packets of my essence-nourishing powder, cut with a bit of flour to stretch the margin, 300 coins each. The pitch sold itself. Chi and blood nourished, spirit strengthened, and I want to stress, this is a direct quote from my own signage, the spear never falls in battle. A scarred thug named Ma Si tried the classic newcomer shakedown, demanded a free sample to test my product, with the unspoken part being that the test involved my face and his fist. I took his wrist in an iron grip he could not break, tossed him back a step, and then, casually, for educational purposes, I walked over and hoisted a stone boundary marker that had to weigh a couple hundred caddies and set it down again like I was tidying up. First tier flesh-tempering strength, flashed on purpose. Scarface Mossy did the math on what my grip meant if that was my strength, decided he had urgent business elsewhere, and left. File Scarface away too. He'll be back, and he keeps birds. To close the actual sale, I needed a demo, so I gave a free half packet to a harmless-looking fellow in hemp clothes and had him swallow it. His face flushed, his blood surged, his eyes brightened, all completely real. The tonic works, that's the whole point. And then, at the exact moment his blood was up, a well-endowed woman in a light veil happened to drift past the stall, and my volunteer's nose promptly began to bleed. The crowd roared, "Proof of efficacy, ladies and gentlemen, right before your eyes." Sold all 10 packets in about 4 minutes. Sex sells, and so, apparently, does a spontaneous nosebleed. I don't make the rules of commerce. My hemp-clothed volunteer, whose name turned out to be Liu's son, which very literally means idiot, was so grateful for the free half packet and the entertainment that he tipped me off to something better. There was a stall on the far side, he said, run by an old tomb raider, selling cheap martial manuals. Most fake, sure. But cheap. Now, I never used my real name at the black market. Down here, I was Shu Fan, and the dog was Xiao Wudi, Little Blackie, and if you have a problem with those names, take it up with someone braver than me. I drifted over to the old man's stall in my mask, and Liu's son was right. It was 90% garbage, water-stained nonsense, and outright forgeries. But my panel doesn't care about presentation. It cares about compatibility, and on one dog-eared, worm-eaten, obviously incomplete fragment, the record lit up. 5 spirits fist. Incomplete. 97% compatible with what I already had. Synthesizable. 97%. That fragment, fused with my broken 5 elements fist, would give me the complete high-grade version. The 50-tael version. Sitting in a pile of trash with the price of trash. The old man, a mustachioed operator who could smell my interest the way a shark smells a nosebleed, named his price. 80,000 taels, he said without blinking. 80,000, I repeated. For this one, that's more whole than paper. I set it down, picked it back up, sighed like it was breaking my heart to even bargain. 3 coins. 3 coins? He clutched his chest. 3 coins. You're going to bankrupt an old man. You're going to leave my children to starve. 3 coins is robbery. This is a priceless legacy of the ancients. And on, a full aria of financial agony, and I let him sing all of it, and then I put 3 coins on the table and did not touch the manual, and waited. He looked at the 3 coins. He looked at me. And with the anguish of a man selling his own liver, he took the 3 coins, shoved the fragment at me, and, in a final flourish of spite, threw in a battered erotic novel for free. So you understand what you're wasting your youth on. A 20-tall fusion fragment for 3 coins and a dirty book. I love the black market. I did not love what was waiting for me outside it. I'd flashed a little too much strength at that stall, made a little too much noise selling out my powder, and as I left the valley, I picked up 2 tails. Xiaohei, drifting behind me as a stray, confirmed it with a low huff. 2 men following, patient, closing. Han San and Zhu Si. First-rank martial artists, both of them, both drowning in Black Wolf gang debt at that beautiful 100% interest rate, both of them desperate enough to hear a kid with a miracle pill formula and see a way out of the hole. They wanted my recipe, and they'd decided the cleanest way to get it was to take it off my body, so this was the moment I'd been building toward down in the mud. First blood. And I was not going to do it fair, because fair is for people who want to be remembered, and I wanted to be forgotten. I didn't run for the road, I ran for ground I'd already read. On the way in, I'd clocked a good ambush spot, a stand of trees by a rise, and I'd stashed a machete up in the branches like a squirrel with anger issues, and I'd put Xiaohei behind a mound where 2 panting men chasing a boy would never think to look. Then I let them chase me right past it. Han San came into the trees first, sure he had me, and I came down out of the branches with the machete and the soul-severing blade technique, and I put everything into 1 strike, and Han San did not get up. 1 motion. Over. I'm going to keep it that plain, because that's how it actually is when it works, and because a funeral man doesn't dwell on the mess. There wasn't time to dwell anyway. Zhu Si saw his partner drop, and his nerve held better than I'd have liked. He whipped 3 throwing knives at me, quick and low, and I felt the wind of them go past as I twisted off the Ling Shu step. Poisoned. All 3. The kind of nasty little insurance a desperate man carries. And while he was committed to the throw, 100-odd caddies of immortal black dog hit him from the side out of absolutely nowhere and took his legs, and I closed the distance, and Zhu Si did not get up either. 2 men. Neither of them ever knew there was a dog. Neither of them ever knew the boy they were chasing had a machete waiting in a tree. That's the whole trade. Real danger, met with a plan they never saw, ended before it could become a fight. I searched them. A tail and 43 coins, a refined steel knife and dagger, the 3 poison throwing knives, and a little vial of arsenic, because of course, I took all of it. Then I stood over 2 Black Wolf debtors in the dark, and I said the second rule out loud, the one I'd learned from old Mo and Shu Lei and my own dead reflection, the one I'd been circling since I got to this city. The Jianghu is treacherous, Xiaohei. Everyone smiles and everyone lies, and half of them are doing the interest rate math on your organs, so we do this from now on, always. We play the fool, we look poor, we look weak, we look like nothing worth chasing. And we keep several trump cards up our sleeve at all times, and we never ever show the last one. I cleaned the machete. The strongest man in the room dies in the room. The man everyone underestimates walks home. Xiaohei, breathing hard, blood not his own on his muzzle, wagged his tail once. We walked home. Nobody chased us. That's the whole idea. Back home, I fed the 3-coin fragment to the system. 100 points of life experience, and my broken blood-drinking 5 elements fist fused with the fragment into the complete 5 elements fist, yellow rank middle grade, and here is the beautiful part, the part that changed my whole trajectory. The complete version had 4 health-preserving training methods braided into the 5 fighting forms, which meant that from now on, when I practiced, I didn't spend blood. I built it. The fist that used to eat me alive now fed me while I swung it. Do you understand what that does to a man with infinite time? Every other martial artist trains until he's empty, then stops, then eats, then rests, then trains again, bottlenecked by his own body at every step. I could just keep going forever. My body caught fire with it and rocketed straight up into 3rd-tier skin tempering, arms gone crystalline and blade-proof, panel reading aptitude 5, chi and blood 108, strength 85. And then, purely for research purposes, I read the free erotic novel, for its literary construction, its artistic themes. Gao Hai caught me holding it and nearly died laughing, then swapped it for a copy of the Spring and Autumn Annals so my soul wouldn't rot, which, thanks, Mom. Then Erlang left, and Erlang left in the most Erlang way imaginable. He got the story he'd always wanted. A wandering great master, an old monk of real power, and Erlang had done the boy some small kindness in the street, and the monk had looked at that huge earnest kid and offered to take him as a disciple and show him the wide Jianghu. Erlong came to say goodbye, glowing like a lantern, his whole storybook dream, walking in off the street to collect him. I felt something cold about it, if I'm honest. A great master who scoops a random strong kid off the street, no questions, no cost. In this city, the too good to be true thing is a hook, and the hook is always attached to a line, and the line is always attached to somebody hungry, but you can't say that to a boy holding his dream in both hands. You can't be the one who poisons the one good thing that ever happened to him. So I smiled, and I threw him a farewell feast instead. Roast chicken and a fried fish as long as my arm, and braised pork and a pork knuckle. And old Mo, our resident cynic, contributed an entire roast dog, which made for a deeply uncomfortable evening given who was under the table pretending to be a normal pet. Xiao He did not touch the roast dog. Xiao He made a note in his book. Old Mo gave Erlong the only send-off that mattered, the truth, one more time. No good men in the Jianghu, kid. Every hero's a robber with a good storyteller. Watch the ones who smile easy. Erlong laughed it off, hugged us all, slapped himself once for luck, declared he deserved to die of happiness, and walked out the gate into his story. A new hire named Little Mo took his cot. I hoped the old drunk was wrong about the Jianghu for Erlong's sake. He was not wrong. He was never wrong. I ground the fist to full mastery in the weeks after, aptitude climbing 5, 6, 7, 8, and got a real feel for the local ceiling while I did. In a village, a first-tier martial artist is a warlord. In a county seat, tier 3 to 6 is the top of the food chain. But in a prefecture city like Jiangcheng, there are things at tier 7 and above behind the family walls, and the ironclad local rule is that a low-tier nobody who flashes money or power in the open simply disappears, quietly, and no one asks where. Which was, of course, exactly the rule I'd already built my whole life around. Look poor, look weak, vanish before anyone decides you're worth the trouble. And then Kuiji changed my education entirely, because Kuiji was not only the mortuary's exorcist, he was one of the most famous yin-yang masters in Jiangcheng, grandmaster rank when it came to hauntings and walking corpses, a man people begged to come to their homes when the dead wouldn't stay dead. He'd lost his ritual assistant when Erlang walked off into his story, and the job needs an assistant with strong blood and heavy yang qi, because a living furnace of yang is what keeps the evil things at arm's length. He looked at me, his strange, soul-soothing horn player, who was secretly a tier 3 martial artist, and he offered me the role. I nearly bit his hand off, saying yes. Do you know what a yin-yang master gets called to deal with? The strong dead, the powerful, restless, angry dead. And every one of them is a funeral, and the stronger the corpse, the fatter the reward. Being Kuiji's assistant was going to walk me straight up to the best-fed table in the city. The first job proved it. Someone important had died wrong. And not just anyone. The client turned out to be the Black Wolf Gang, my paycheck-robbing, master fan employing friends, and the dead man was one of their 4 great protectors. The gang had 4, gold, silver, bronze, and iron, each of them a 5th-tier martial artist or better, the muscle that held their whole empire up. The Iron Wolf Protector had died, and then he had started doing things a dead man shouldn't, and the Black Wolf Gang, terrified, had sent for the best yin-yang master in the city, a 5th-tier funeral reward. I had to physically stop myself from grinning at a grieving crime syndicate. My enemy's dead champion was going to make me stronger. If that's not poetry, nothing is. The morning hall told us it was real the second we walked in. A charming young widow met us at the door, wringing her hands, and her story had all the classic notes. Her husband wouldn't rest. Things rummaged in the night. Cold winds came from nowhere. A monk they'd hired first, from the Dragon Temple, had collapsed mid-chant and had to be carried out. And the hall itself, under a bright noon sun, was bone cold, cold enough to see your breath, and the corpse lay pale on the bier with its eyes wide open, and above its still face, impossibly, a small puddle of clear water had gathered in the air and was pooling there like the dead man was weeping upward. Kuiji's face went grim. Evil chi, he said quietly, condensing into water. This one's bad. He rolled up his sleeves. Stay close, boy. And whatever you see and hear after dark, whatever calls your name, you make no sound, and you answer no one. I checked the black book in my head. Iron Wolf Protector. 5th tier. And I got to bury him, at the Black Wolf Gang's own expense. Some days the ledger pays interest. The dead protector's name was Qi Yong, and his panel was the biggest I'd ever seen. Qi and blood plus 188. Life experience plus 888. A menu of 5th-tier techniques under it, ironclad skill, mad demon sword, a monument-shattering leg, and, interestingly, an incomplete something called the Black Wolf Heart Method. Attendance a measly 8% though, because a gang enforcer isn't exactly mourned. The good options were locked behind 50. I'd have to earn them. Kuiji spent the daylight hours doing his job, which, I learned watching him closely, was about half real and half theater. The self-igniting talismans that burst into flame at a wave of his hand. White phosphorus and a little friction, chemistry dressed as sorcery. The elaborate sword dance around the coffin. Pure performance, so the terrified family felt their money buying something big and impressive. A locksmith who opens your door in 5 seconds, Queegee murmured to me, still stands there jiggling tools for 10 minutes, or the customer feels cheated. Same trade. But under the theater sat the real knowledge, and the real knowledge was this. When a man kills and kills, the evil chi of it builds up in him, and if he dies while it's still in there, it curdles, and the corpse turns. Chi-Yong had killed a great many people for the Black Wolf Gang. Now all of it was coming back up through him. He gave me the vigil rule twice, so I'd feel it. After midnight, no matter what you see, you make no sound. No matter who calls your name in that dark, you do not answer. Not your mother's voice, not mine. Nothing that talks to you tonight is your friend. Midnight came, and the theater ended. The fog rolled in from nowhere, and the cinnabar on Queegee's warding talismans dissolved right off the paper as it touched them, which does not happen, which is not chemistry. Doors banged open on a windless night. The cold went from uncomfortable to killing. And across the floor of the hall, one slow step at a time, wet footprints pressed themselves into the dry boards and walked toward the coffin. Nothing there, just the footprints, coming. Queegee met it like a man who'd done this 100 times, talismans flying, peachwood sword carving the air, and for a while he held. First wave repelled, then the second wave came, heavier, and I watched a legendary yin-yang master start to lose. His talismans ran out, and then his peach sword, the tool of his trade, snapped clean in his hand like a dry reed. I had 2 warding talismans on my chest, and they bought a heartbeat, no more. So I did the only thing I actually know how to do. I put the horn to my lips, and I played the soul-suppressing melody out of the yin talisman lore Queegee had started teaching me, and the yin wind stopped, actually stopped, hanging in the air like a held breath. It cost me. It felt like lifting 1,000 catty weight with my lungs, but it bought Queegee the one thing he needed, which was a moment. He used it to bite his own finger open and paint a talisman in his own blood. The blood talisman self-ignited without any phosphorus, without any trick, and blasted the yin wind out of the hall in a wave of real heat, and Chi-Yong's angry remnant broke apart against it and was gone. Queegee sagged, gray-faced, and I understood I'd just watched something cost him more than sweat. Blood runes, he told me later, both of us wrung out and talking till dawn the way you do after you've nearly died together. You spend your own life essence to draw them, not spirit stones, not cinnabar, you. That's why nobody uses them anymore. And then the part that lit up my whole future. Blood runes were the art of the ancient body-refining warriors, from an age when martial artists like us stood shoulder to shoulder with the immortal chi refiners, before our whole line withered into mere fists and knives while theirs bloomed into a civilization that touches the sky. Once, he said, we were their equals. I filed that away with everything else. A dog isn't the only one who keeps a book. We buried Chi-Yong the next day. Queegee put on a full show of flaming talismans for the Black Wolf Gang, then discreetly rubbed his scorched fingers on his robe when he thought no one was looking, and the grateful gang paid 30 taels, of which I saw 10, and walking home, tired and rich, I passed a fat, kindly-faced monk in the street, and trailing a few steps behind him, hood up, was a big man, a huge man, built like a 2-meter iron tower, built exactly like a 16-year-old I'd fed noodles to and thrown a farewell feast for. He walked past me without turning his head. I told myself it was a coincidence. Cities are full of big men. I told myself that pretty firmly, and I kept walking, and something under my ribs did not believe me. Then I claimed Chi-Yong, and let the good news drown the bad feeling. Chi and blood plus 188, life experience plus 888, and with 53% attendance and 70% satisfaction, 2 doors open. I took the ironclad body tempering skill, yellow rank middle grade, defense for my crystalline skin. And I took 999 points of swordsmanship experience and poured it straight into the soul-severing blade, and the knife I'd taken off a dead mountain boy weeks ago clicked over into full mastery, 3 killing strikes in the space of 1. A gang's dead champion, paid for by the gang, buried at the gang's expense, and folded whole into me. I added a line under Chi-Yong's name in the ledger, not a grudge this time, a thank you. The Black Wolf Gang was going to fund my rise brick by brick and never know it, and by the time they figured it out, if they ever did, I intended to be the last thing they figured out at all. I tempered the new ironclad skill under a 100-foot waterfall, water coming down hard enough to flay an ox, and stood in it, feeling nothing but pleasantly refreshed, skin gone to crystal. 110 points of life experience took it to mastery. Cold season came, which meant more frozen and starved dead, which is grim math, but it's my math, so business was good, even as the crew grumbled about the chill, and Queegee made it official. He'd made Erlang earn it, 3 years and 3 years and 3 more of assessment before any real teaching. Me, he took as a formal disciple after a fraction of that, because of the soul-soothing in my horn, because he decided the Yin Talisman Sutra shouldn't die with him, and I was the one who could carry it. We did the tea ceremony properly, and he laid down the 2 unbreakable rules of his line. Never betray your master or the ancestors, and never, ever turn the incantations to evil. I bowed and swore both, and I meant both, and the crew started calling him Uncle Nine around me, the affectionate name, Ninth Uncle, and somewhere in there this careful, lonely exorcist quietly became the closest thing to a father I had in either of my lives. Remember him. Everything that matters later runs through this man. Also, he immediately used our sacred master-disciple bond to have me draw a bone-softening talisman for a fishbone stuck in his throat, so let's not get too misty. The city, meanwhile, was getting sick. Down at the black market, where the immortal old bookseller Pan still opened every negotiation at 80,000 taels no matter what you were buying, my essence-nourishing powder sold out the moment I set it down, capped at 20 packets a month to keep from drawing eyes. I grabbed one more real fragment off Pan's junk pile for 100 coins. A lightness art called Swallow skims the water 3 times, and while I was haggling, a dark-faced young man went stiff and wrong and smashed one of Pan's vases with his bare fist for no reason at all, eyes gone empty. I slapped a warding talisman on his forehead and his head cleared and he apologized, bewildered, like he'd woken from a dream. And then people started coming out of the crowd. A lot of people. All with that same haunted, half-there look, all wanting to buy whatever it was I'd just used. I sold anti-evil talismans until I ran out and walked away 10 taels richer and deeply uneasy. Evil chi wasn't supposed to work like this. It wasn't supposed to spread like a cough through a market. Something was very wrong in Zhangcheng, and getting wronger, and on top of it, the Black Wolf Gang and the Divine Strength sect were sliding toward open war, which was driving the demand for my chi and blood pills through the roof. Bad for the city, tremendous for the pharmacist. I fused the swallow art into my Lingsu step and got flying swallow steps out of it, nimbler than ever, and I ground my blood runes in the dark, which was miserable work because everyone costs you your own essence, and a single flinch ruins it. Half a month of bleeding on paper got me exactly 3 usable talismans, an evil gathering rune, a fire starting rune, and a corpse control rune. 3. I was starting to understand in my body why the ancient blood warriors had faded while the immortals soared. Their power came out of a spirit stone economy. Ours came out of a vein. Then the Black Wolf Gang doubled our protection fee to 200 coins, and Master Fan made an example of the nicest people on our street to celebrate. Old Zhao and his wife sold wontons across from Aunt Mo's noodle stall, gentle old people who'd spent their whole savings on the wife's illness and had nothing left to pay a shakedown with. So Fan smashed their stall and pressed the old man's thumbprint onto an IOU for 560 coins they'd never see the far side of, and made it very clear he had his eye on their little courtyard as collateral. The old man ended up on the ground. I'll leave it there. You know the shape of it. I stood in the crowd that found something to look at in the opposite direction, the exact crowd that once watched a boy get beaten to death in a village street, and I did not move, because moving then would have accomplished nothing but blowing 20 years of patience on one leaf of a very large tree. Killing Fan fixes nothing, I told Xiaohei that night, and I meant it as a discipline, not an excuse. The Black Wolf Gang is the tree, but I'm writing it down, and when they're weak, when the war has bled them thin, that is the day, not before. The day of revenge is the day your enemy can't stop you, and not 1 hour sooner. I underlined Fan's name. The interest was compounding. The war, when it broke, was a windfall dressed as a tragedy. The Divine Strength sect and the Black Wolf Gang went at each other in the streets, and the streets sent us their dead in cartloads, and I buried every single one. Somewhere in that flood, a panel offered me a reward I'd never seen before, 1 full year of martial cultivation, condensed, and I took it and broke straight through into 4th tier, the meridian opening realm, my hand tie and lung meridian cracking open, real internal energy pouring into me for the first time. Then, a Divine Strength senior brother named Mo Lin came through the mortuary, 4th tier himself, and gave up sword experience and a Vajra body art with 92% compatibility to my ironclad, which fused into Vajra iron armor kung fu, yellow rank high grade, a defense that could laugh at knives. The 4 great families finally stepped in and mediated a truce before the whole South City burned. And all across Zhangcheng, ghouls and fiend corpses were rising out of the ground, more every week. The sickness wasn't slowing. It was building towards something. It came for me in my own workplace. A body we had in storage sat up. It had gone rusty iron gray, skin like armor plate, a fiend corpse, dead man's flesh soaked in so much of the city's evil chi that it had turned. Fast as a first-rank martial artist, and hard enough that my soul-severing blade skated right off its hide and my palm strikes might as well have been love taps. So I stopped trying to cut it and did it the ugly way. I caved its chest in with a straight punch, hooked an azure dragon claw into its shoulder and popped the arm out of the socket, broke the thing down joint by joint until it couldn't stand, and slapped one of my 3 precious corpse control blood runes on its brow. So subdued, panting, not a scratch on me thanks to the Vajra armor. Gao Hai saw the whole thing, and Gao Hai could not keep a secret if his life depended on it, which was exactly why I let him see it. But I made sure the version he saw looked like a scrappy second-tier martial artist getting lucky, not a fourth-tier fighter in a concealment technique. So by the next morning, all of Yangliu Street was telling each other that the mortuary's little he, the horn boy, the one who's maybe a second tier at best, had wrestled a demon corpse barehanded and won. Perfect. Strong enough to be left alone. Weak enough to be underestimated. The exact reputation I'd been building on purpose, handed to me for free by the one man in the building who couldn't shut up. Aunt Mo started giving me extra scallions. Shameless. He, suddenly nervous about the demon wrestler on staff, hastily returned the 5 taels he'd skimmed off me months ago. And I stockpiled blood runes and silver and ginseng, and started quietly selling warding talismans alongside my tonic, because a city this sick was going to need a great many funerals soon, and I intended to be standing right in the middle of all of them with a horn. My warding talismans became the hottest product in the South City. The evil cheese sickness kept spreading, and sick people's families mobbed my stall, 20 sets a visit at a tael or 2 each, and I finally got to turn Old Man Pan's own weapon against him, opening my price at 80,000 taels just to watch his face. Good times. But good times at a black market draw eyes, and one pair of eyes belonged to Scarface Ma Si, the shakedown thug I'd tossed weeks back, who I now noticed kept birds, and who slipped off into an alley and let a carrier pigeon go the second he clocked how much money my talismans were pulling. Somebody, somewhere, had just been told about me. I finished the sale, I stayed alert, and I went home the long way. The long way is where they jumped me. A masked third-tier fighter, calling himself Senior Brother Liu, stepped out with a pitch and a threat folded together. He wanted my gathering evil blood talismans, 5 taels apiece, all I could make. Or better yet, he wanted me. Join us, he said, and then, when I didn't leap at it, the classic, join us or die, and he came in with a 42 tiger-subduing fist and slapped a divine power blood rune onto his own chest, bloody light flaring, muscles swelling, and I thought, well, that answers the question of who's been recruiting yin-yang masters to farm blood runes, doesn't it? I let him think he had me. I gave ground, played the overmatched horn boy backpedaling in a panic, drew him and his confidence forward, and right on cue the second half of the ambush revealed itself, a bald crossbowman in the shadows who put 3 poisoned bolts into my back. I dropped, I hit the dirt and lay there limp, dead weight, the perfect corpse. Which was easy, because thanks to my Vajra iron armor, the poisoned bolts had crumpled against my skin like somebody threw pencils at a bank vault. They just didn't know that yet. Senior Brother Liu strolled over, drew a test knife, and laid it against my neck to make sure, and the blade skidded off my throat with a screech of metal on metal, and I heard his voice go from smug to horrified in the space of one word. Skin tempering? No. That's 4th order body. That's the last full sentence he got out. I came up off the ground and put him down, and Xiaohei came out of the dark and took the crossbowman's legs before he could crank another bolt, and I pinned the bald man's arm and had a very direct conversation with him about who sent him. He talked fast, the way men do when the ambush becomes an interrogation. They recruited yin-yang masters because they needed blood runes drawn in bulk. My little talisman stall had, without my knowing it, been undercutting and exposing their whole operation. And Scarface, it turned out, was this Senior Brother Liu's nephew, the pigeon that pointed them at me. And then the bald man got to the important part. The name, we serve the red, and something I could not see reached into him and stopped his heart mid-word. A leash yanked from very far away. Whatever they were, they'd built their people so the people couldn't name them out loud. That is a deeply unsettling thing to learn about your new enemy. The loot, on the other hand, was a delight. 18 taels and an armor-piercing crossbow off the bald man, and off Senior Brother Liu, 500 taels in silver notes, a slim book titled Yin-Yang Blood Talisman Sutra, Volume 6, and a small dark red iron token stamped with a lotus and the number 19. 500 taels turned me from a scraping street vendor into a genuinely wealthy young man overnight, and the red lotus token told me the name the bald man died trying not to say. A cult. A big one. Numbered members. Reaching into my city, harvesting blood runes, spreading a sickness, and now, thanks to Scarface's pigeon, aware that a talisman-selling horn boy existed. I did not love being on their list, but I loved Volume 6. Volume 6 leveled up my whole art. A divine power rune that spikes your strength 50% for a burst, the Gathering Evil rune, complete, and a sharp gold armor-piercing rune you mount on a weapon to punch through defenses in 3 inches of stone. I finally understood the deep secret of the talisman aperture, the core stroke that repels the ink around it like 2 magnets shoved the wrong way, one tremor and it's ruined. I bled my way to real mastery, tested the divine power rune by snapping a tree as thick as my thigh, and opened my 10th of 12 meridians, the foot Shaoyan kidney line. The last 2, though, the panel warned me, would not open on brute force and blood alone. For those I needed a real internal mind cultivation technique, the kind that's nearly impossible to buy, priced but not sold, family heirlooms and gang core secrets guarded to the death, because the wrong one taken wrong turns your brain to soup. I filed it under problems for later. I had a lot of those. The city, meanwhile, was starving. River pirates hijacked the grain ships on the White Dragon River. The Liu and Zhao families gouged what was left, and a bowl of Aunt Mo's scallion noodles went from 2 coins to 5. Uncle Nine, bless him, responded to hard times by cooking me his tiger bone soup and calling it his final masterpiece, and I found the reason for his good mood when I spotted the book stashed under his pillow, a lurid little novel called The White Fox. Honing my heart nature, he said with tremendous dignity. Sure, ninth uncle, hone away. And then Master Fan came back, and Master Fan made his final mistake. Protection was now twice a month, because a starving city is when the wolves eat best. Fan collected, and then he looked past me, at Xiaohei lying by the door pretending to be a normal dog, and he smiled. His deputy leader, he said, wanted a clever black dog. Something about feeding a smart dog to a strong man to ward off evil, some ugly bit of gang superstition. Tie the dog up by the 15th, Fan told me, friendly as a knife, or you'll be the one on the chopping block. Old Mo, later, filled in the last piece. Fan's protection ran straight up to the top. His sister was concubine to Jianggu Dragon, the Black Wolf Gang's 7th-tier vice leader. Untouchable in theory. Here is the thing about the ledger I keep. Most names on it can wait. I am immortal. I can wait out empires. But there is exactly one line item that does not get to wait, and Fan had just walked up and pointed at it. You threaten my dog. You have moved yourself to the top of the list. I played it perfectly. I got soft and scared and compliant, fed Xiaohei extra well like a man saying goodbye, and spent a week learning Fan's routine instead. Drunk most nights, a mistress every 3 days. Predictable as a sunrise, the way arrogant men always are. On the night of the 12th, I left a rolled blanket in my bed, dressed in black, and took to the rooftops with my Zhuan turtle concealment wrapped around me so tight the night itself couldn't find me. Fan came weaving out of his mistress's place into a dark alley, alone, singing to himself, and a crossbow bolt with a sharp gold rune on the tip came out of the dark and found him, and a dagger made sure, and the one-eyed terror of Yang Liu Street who broke his own mother's leg and destroyed a wanton seller for pocket change went down in an alley without ever seeing who did it. Then I stuck 3 gathering evil talismans to what was left, and black flame ran over him and ate him down to a clean white skeleton. No wound, no poison, no blade mark, no story for anyone to read. Even a legendary magistrate couldn't have told you how that man died. I don't leave evidence. I'm a funeral man. I return people to dust, and dust doesn't testify. I walked home along the rooftops. Not a sound, not a witness. Fan had been on that list for the better part of a year. Old Zhao got his courtyard kept. Xiaohei got to keep being a dog, and the ledger, for the first time in this city, got a line drawn cleanly through a name, 1 leaf off the tree. The tree was still standing. But you have to start somewhere, and I'd started with the one who pointed at my dog. Uncle Nine was awake when I got home. Of course he was. He'd felt the evil chi move across the city the moment I lit those talismans, the way you feel a door open in a house, you know. He looked at me for a long time and asked the only question that mattered to him. Did you use what I taught you for evil? I killed Master Fan, I said. He broke his mother's leg for money. He destroyed the wonton sellers. He threatened my dog. And I'll sleep fine. And then I told him the thing I actually believe, the creed under all of it. There's no justice in this world, ninth uncle. Not the kind that comes and saves you. So the knife in my hand has to be the justice. It's the only kind that ever shows up on time. He studied me a while longer, this gentle exorcist who'd made me swear never to turn the art to evil, and then something in his face let go. Clear conscience, he said quietly, and completely reasonable. I trust you. And instead of a lecture, he gave me a gift, a Qingming blood talisman, the rune that blocks a murdered spirit from ever tracking its killer through the yin-yang arts, which is a very specific gift to give a young man who just killed somebody. Uncle Nine knew exactly who I was. He decided to help me be good at it. That's a rarer kind of love than the soft kind, and I knew it even then. The cover-up practically wrote itself. Fan's sister, the vice leader's concubine, screamed for the city's finest yin-yang master to find her brother's killer, and the city's finest yin-yang master was, of course, Uncle Nine, who came, investigated with great ceremony, and gravely concluded that Master Fan had been devoured by the very evil qi plague sweeping Jiangcheng. Case closed. And the body, being unclaimed by any coroner's finding, came to the mortuary for a grand funeral, and the funeral was handed to me. I got to bury the man I'd murdered, at his own family's expense, with a horn. If there's a cleaner circle than that, I've never drawn one. I played Fan the soul-destroying song, the one from the middle volume of Uncle Nine's Sutra, so his spirit couldn't linger or be summoned, so he was simply gone, all the way gone, and the panel that opened over him made me a very dangerous man. 86% attendance because a gang collector's death is a party, and 88% satisfaction, 2 doors wide open. And there in the options, the thing I'd been told was unbuyable at any price, a real internal mind cultivation technique. The complete Black Wolf Heart method, profound rank, low grade, which Jianggu Dragon had once whispered to his mistress's brother in bed like a fool. I took it, and I took 1,300 points of knife experience beside it. The soul-severing blade broke through again, and the Black Wolf Heart method did the impossible thing, converted my mountain of chi and blood into pure internal energy at 10-1, kicked my aptitude up 3, and cracked open my last 2 meridians, all 12, open. I coughed up a mouthful of the old black weakness and rose as a 5th-tier martial artist. The Bone Tempering Realm, panel reading aptitude 11, chi and blood 666, internal energy 66. The Black Wolf Gang's own core secret, delivered to me by the man they sent to rob my dog. I noted the 3rd law of the way of the dog in Xiao Hei's book for him, never ever get carried away. Then I got a little carried away, briefly, privately, and got over it. The grain crisis broke soon after, troops retaking the river, prices falling, and I laid in 5 sacks of rice anyway because a man who's been that hungry never fully trusts a full granary again. And in the good days, I forged something I'd been planning a while, a soul-suppressing banner, a peach branch for the pole, cloth washed in rootless water and dried 3 days in the sun, then layered with suppressing and dispelling and ghost-binding runes and a purification rite, 7 days of work. I tested it against a wisp of the city's evil chi and watched the wisp come apart. A funeral man should have a proper standard to march under. I had no idea how soon I'd need it, because that was when a kind-faced fat monk walked into the mortuary with 4 disciples and a body, and the body was Erlong, the huge sweet 16-year-old who slapped himself for luck and wanted so badly to be a hero, who'd walked out my gate glowing into his storybook. His skin had gone blue. The monk, all warmth and folded hands, explained that this lay disciple of the Dragon Temple had sadly passed, and would we handle a proper Buddhist rite, and here is generous payment. And the panel opened over my dead friend. Zhao Erlang, Dragon Temple lay disciple, age 19, 3rd tier, and a menu of options that read like a butcher's inventory, Iron Corpse Technique, Golden Bell Shield, Dragon Power. Iron Corpse Technique, on a 19-year-old. The system gave me his last moments, the way it always does, and I have played 1,000 funerals, and I have never wanted to put the horn down and simply kill someone in the middle of one until that one. Erlong, in a vat of medicine, held under, while this same smiling monk and a young man in white robes stood over him chanting. Fear is the best medicine, the white-robed one said, pleasant as anything, for the greater cause, and then they drove silver needles into my friend's skull. A month ago, his murderer was standing in front of me, being polite, paying me to bury the evidence. My hands are very steady. 20 years of funerals make your hands steady no matter what's happening in your chest. But the horn caught, one single wrong note, one tiny tremble, and the fat monk's kind eyes flicked to me for half a second, weighing, before the mask smoothed back over. He'd noticed. I made myself finish the phrase clean and let the concealment technique do its work. Let him see a mediocre hornboy and nothing more. They wouldn't let me dress the body. Buddhist custom, the monk said, and I let it go, because you don't argue with the man you've just decided to kill, not before you know the shape of what he's building. I signaled Xiao Hei with my eyes. Something was very wrong, and it was centered on my building, and my master was in it. At midnight the mask came off. From the roof, wrapped in concealment, I watched the fat monk stop smiling and take stock, satisfied, of a mortuary whose strongest visible men were a 2nd-tier hornboy and an old yin-yang exorcist. My whole disguise working perfectly, telling my enemy I was harmless at the worst possible moment. Proceed as planned, he told his 4 disciples, and the 4 of them fanned out to the hills ringing the mortuary and uncorked their gourds, and every gourd was full, months of harvested evil chi from a whole 6 city, and it all poured out at once and began to turn, a vortex a full mile across with my workplace at the dead center of it. My banner snapped in a wind that had no source. Xiao Hei went rigid and barked once, low, and in the hall, the stored bodies started to sit up. I found Uncle Nine already moving, already grim, already understanding it faster than I did. Get the others out, he ordered. Now, all of them. I told him to come. He wouldn't. This is my post boy. This is the whole reason I exist. He shoved me toward the door and said the thing that told me he already thought he was going to die here. You are the last one who carries the Yin Talisman Sutra. The legacy does not break tonight, so you live. That's an order too. I didn't have time to fight him and I couldn't win it anyway. So I did the only thing I could, pressed a blood talisman note into his hand with 4 fast words scrawled on it. Those monks are false. and I grabbed Gao Hai and Old Mo and Little Mo and the rest, and I ran them out under my banner, warding talismans slapped on every chest. We got about 50 feet. The evil chi outside wasn't a fog, it was a wall, ghost faces boiling in it, ghost flames, a wailing that got into your teeth, and it did not part for us. We were penned in. Behind us, a mile-wide storm of hungry dead. At the center of it, a monk who murdered children for parts, and my master alone in the middle of all of it, refusing to run. I looked at my banner, and my dog, and the trapped, terrified crew at my back, and I made the math work the only way it worked. Get them to the mass grave, I told Xiaohei, low. Lighter evil chi over the old graves, it's the seam in the wall, take them out that way. The dog understood every word, the way he always did. I'm going back for him. Because Mr. Lin taught me a rule in a village a lifetime ago, and it outranks every survival rule I ever wrote for myself. Repay a peach with a plum. Uncle Nine gave me a home, a trade, a legacy, and a father when I had none. I was not going to let him die alone in a building full of monsters. Not while I could still walk back into it. I got the crew to the seam first. That's the rule when you're running scared people through a nightmare. You don't abandon them at the wall, you walk them to the gap. The mass grave on the back mountain held lighter evil chi, old settled dead instead of fresh angry ones, and my banner carved a path through the white mist while I burned warding talismans 3 to a chest. Halfway there, a fiend corpse erupted out of the ground and got a hand on Old Mo, and I dropped it clean with the soul-severing blade, but its claws had raked the old man's leg, and the scratch was already going blue. Evil chi infection. I slapped 2 talismans over it and told him to buy glutinous rice for the wound the second they hit Qinghe town, and I meant it. Folk remedies are folk remedies for a reason. At the seam, I handed them to the dog. Get them to Qinghe, I told Xiaohei, and Gaohai grabbed my sleeve, understanding too late what I was doing. I peeled his fingers off gently. Uncle Nine's still in there. Go. And I turned and went back into the mile-wide storm alone, because some math only balances one way. Uncle Nine was making his stand in the heart of it, and it was the finest and most terrible thing I ever saw the old man do. He talismaned the morgue shut, put down 2 fiend corpses, and then he told me the secret of the whole building. The mortuary sat on the eye of a great feng shui formation, an array that had suppressed the evil chi of Jiangcheng for generations. That was why the cult wanted it. Flip that eye from yang to yin, and you don't just raise some zombies for a night, you poison the luck and the very ground of the whole city for 1,000 years. This was never a robbery, it was an execution of a city, so Uncle Nine did the only thing that could stop it. He bit his fingers open and drew, not 1 blood rune, not 3, but 9. 9 yang-suppressing evil talismans, 9 of his own life essence spent in a row, and the vortex faltered and began to come apart, and I watched from the dark as my master's hair went from gray to white in a single night, the cost of it written into him in real time. And then Erlong's body sat up, and the golden dragon monk stepped out of the storm and knocked the spent old man down with one contemptuous blow and told him the rest of it while he worked, because monsters love an audience. Erlong hadn't just been murdered. Erlong was raw material, a body being refined into a bronze-armored corpse, a walking siege weapon. And Uncle Nine, a third-tier yin-yang master rich with the right kind of essence, was the blood food meant to finish the refining. The monk tipped a gourd of evil chi into my dead friend and reached for my dying master, and I was still too far out to reach either. But I wasn't alone, and I never had been. Xiaohei had handed the crew off at the town edge and doubled straight back, and it turned out my dog had been quietly tailing these monks since the day the fat one first walked past me in the street with a cloaked Erlang behind him. Xiaohei knew every one of the 4 disciples' positions. Xiaohei knew where each gourd sat on each hill. My immortal dog had scouted the entire enemy formation while I was busy being suspicious and doing nothing about it, and now he laid it all out for me with his eyes and his low certain growl, and a man and a dog went hunting the array from the outside in. 2 of the 4 disciples anchored the near hills, and 2 of the 4 disciples were about to have a very bad night. The first was Jing Ming, 3rd tier, standing proud inside a golden bell shield he clearly thought made him untouchable. I put a crossbow bolt with a sharp gold armor-piercing rune on the tip straight through that famous shield like it was bean curd, and Jing Ming did not get up, and I smashed his gourd and tore out his corner of the array. 1 of 5 formation eyes, dark. The second was Huiyan, the great disciple, 4th tier, and genuinely dangerous, and he came at me with an Arhat-slaying blade and 5 golden hidden spears that flashed out of his sleeves at my heart. The spears hit my Vajra iron armor and stopped, every one of them, turned aside by a defense he had no way to know I had. My own steel knife snapped against his blade in the exchange, but a snapped knife doesn't matter when you're faster than the other man, and I was much, much faster than the other man, and Huiyan went down beside his brother monk. I took 100-odd tails and a fine ring knife off him to replace the one he'd broken, and I broke his gourd too. 2 eyes dark. Break enough eyes and the whole great array collapses, and I could already feel this one starting to sag. 2 disciples down, 2 corners of the storm torn open, and my knees under me, and my knife heavy in my hand. I turned toward the mortuary, and the thing at the center of it, the fat monk with his hands full of my master and his half-finished bronze corpse rising off the floor, and I did not run this time. I walked in. The golden dragon monk had a half-finished bronze corpse rising off the floor, and my unconscious master laid out for the sacrifice, and I strolled in through the wreckage like I'd wandered into the wrong tea house. "Awfully windy out tonight, master," I said. "Mind if I come in for a drink?" He tested me the way strong men test, by throwing a full wine gourd at my head hard enough to cave a skull. I caught it out of the air on an azure dragon claw without spilling a drop and set it down. And then I threw him something back, underhand, a little package, and I watched him catch it and open it and go still, because inside was Huyan's prayer beads and a strip of his robe, and the fat monk understood in 1 second that his great disciple was not coming, that 2 of his 4 corners were already dark, that the harmless horn boy had walked in here alone on purpose. It's a mean trick, sending a man his dead student's beads. I learned it from 20 years of knowing exactly how grief lands. Then he stopped being kind, all the way, and came at me with the real thing, a skull palm, corpse poison packed into every strike, a palm that eats through defenses. It snapped my brand new ring knife like a twig. His 3-yin corpse claw raked across my chest and I felt it, 5 lines of cold going for my heart, and it left 5 white scratches on my Vajra iron armor and not one thing more. He stared at the 5 harmless marks on a body that should have been opened like a purse, and I saw the first real crack in him, the "who is this?" and I gave him no time to finish the thought. I broke for the wall and went over it, running. He thought I'd lost my nerve. Good. Because the whole exchange, the drink, the beads, the trading blows, all of it had been for one reason, to keep the biggest, meanest thing in that room looking at me, while a black dog nobody was watching dragged an unconscious old exorcist out a side door and into the dark. By the time the monk turned to finish his sacrifice was gone. Uncle Nine was out. Now it was just the 2 of us, and a bell, and a trap I'd set the day I first got a bad feeling about a monk in the street. He was faster than me. That was the problem I'd solved in advance. He ran me down across the mortuary yard, gaining the whole way, and he leapt to cut me off, and he came down right on top of the big stone guardian lion by the gate, which is exactly where I'd needed him to come down, because under that lion I'd buried a repeating crossbow on a pressure trigger, and my own featherlight Lingsu step had crossed that flagstone 100 times without ever setting it off, and a 200 caddy monk landing on it in a hurry set it off beautifully. A poison bolt caught him across the thigh, not a kill. But now there was poison in him, my poison, spreading, and I turned around and stopped running, because the whole point of running had been to get him to that lion. He was still a 5th-tier monster with poison in his leg though, and he had 1 card left. He rang his bell and screamed at the half-finished bronze corpse, "Corpse slave, kill him," and Erlong's stolen body came off the floor and came for me. Bronze skin, blade-proof, claws that punched holes in the stone pillars where I'd been standing a half-second before. I couldn't scratch it, so I didn't try. I danced around it on the Lingsu step, and every time it missed, I slapped a corpse control blood rune onto it, and when the first one failed, I slapped on another, and I kept going, 10, 20, 40, 50, until the thing was papered in my own blood ink from crown to heel, and finally seized up mid-lunge, frozen solid. Behind me, the golden dragon monk had gone gray, and not from the poison. 50-some blood runes. Every one of those cost the drawer a piece of his own life essence, and a normal martial artist who tried to draw 50 in a night would be a husk on the floor, and here was a hornboy flinging them like confetti and still standing. "Who is this kid?" He said it out loud that time. I didn't answer. "Some questions you take with you." The poison did its work, and when he was down and slowing, he did the thing they all do. He bargained. Silver, he had chests of it. Techniques, secrets, a place in his order, become a great master, lorded over 10,000. He offered me everything except the one thing I asked for, which was the name of the cult, the Red Lotus, the people who'd built the bald man so he couldn't say it. He wouldn't give it even dying. Loyal to the end, or leash to the end. Hard to say the difference with these people. "I don't want your silver," I told him. "I don't want your order. I want exactly one thing off you tonight." Xiaohei trotted up and dropped the crossbow at my feet, because my dog is a better partner than most men are. "Your head." I put 2 more bolts in him from a safe distance and a last one through the throat to be certain, and the golden dragon monk, murderer of children, would-be executioner of a whole city, did not get up. The body gave up its life's work to me, the way they all do. Bodhi seeds and a heavy iron ring knife, a copper soul-capturing bell, a pill formula, the dragon tiger bone tempering pill, and a corpse refining manual, which taught me the ladder I was now standing on. Evil corpse at the bottom, then iron-armored, then bronze-armored, then a silver-armored flying zombie, and at the very top, the gold-armored corpse king, the corpse emperor. I dissolve the monk himself down to nothing with gathering evil talismans, because I don't leave evidence, and I do not honor a man like that with a grave. Then I turned to the frozen bronze corpse, the huge one, the one wearing my friend's stolen strength, and I blood-refined the soul-capturing bell and made him mine, and I gave him back a name. Kunyu, I said, sky burial. And then, quieter, the thing I'd walked back into a mile-wide storm to be able to say, Brother Mang, the monk lied to you. There was no wandering master, no wide Jianghu, no story. He took you for parts. But I came back and I put him in the ground, and I'm taking you with me instead of leaving you here. You wanted to be a hero, so be mine. Rest now. I buried what was left of Zhao Erlong properly, with the horn, and the panel gave me a good send-off, 77% attendance, and 62% satisfaction. 2 doors open, because I counted as family, and I meant it. The kid had walked out my gate glowing, chasing the too-good-to-be-true thing, exactly like old Mo warned him, exactly like I'd felt in my gut and said nothing about. I'd let him go to his dream. The least I could do was make sure the man who ended it went first. 2 of the 4 disciples were dead, the golden dragon monk was dust, the vortex was collapsing with its formation eyes torn out, and my master was alive in the dark with my dog standing guard over him. I'd walked into that building a horn boy nobody feared. I was walking out of it something else. But the bald man had died trying to say a name, and the monk had died refusing to, and somewhere in this city a young man in white robes had stood over a vat and called my friend's murder the greater cause and smiled about it. The golden dragon monk was just a hand, the red lotus was the body, and I had just very loudly cut off one of its hands in its own trap. They were going to come looking for whoever did that. I made a note in the ledger, a fresh page, a big one, red lotus, and under it, 1 line, the white-robed young master who smiled. That one wasn't going to wait 100 years. Erlang's send-off gave me a golden bell cover as one of its 2 rewards, and 300 points of life experience fused it with my ironclad into something called the Ironclad Golden Bell Shield, profound rank low grade, a skin of internal energy gauze laid over my copper skin and ironbone body, double defense, the outer coat and the inner one. Between that and the Vajra armor, I was getting genuinely hard to hurt, which for a man whose whole doctrine is run away and hide his cards is the best kind of insurance, the kind that lets the running be a choice instead of a necessity. Then I woke Uncle Nine up, and I lied to him, gently, for his own good. A masked master, I told him. A powerful one, 7th or 8th tier, who'd forced me at knife point to guide him into the mortuary, killed the monk, and flown off into the night without a name. The old man, white-haired now, weak, believing, guessed at which famous recluse it might have been, some Liu Daxia of the clouds, some ape master of the northern peaks. He never once suspected the horn boy he'd taken as a disciple. And his own snow-white hair, the price of 9 blood runes drawn to save a city, he waved off with 2 words. Clear conscience. I got a little wet in the eyes over that, and I'm not ashamed to tell you so. 20 years of funerals, and I still had a father, and he was still breathing, and that is not a small thing in a life like mine. The city took it seriously, because the city understood what the mortuary was now. Chief Constable Zhao Sun came, then the prefect himself took an interest, because a formation that suppresses the evil chi of the whole city is not a thing you leave under a horn boy and an old exorcist. He garrisoned 2 6th-tier experts on the grounds permanently, a pair called the Wind and Thunder Swords. And then came the rewards, and the rewards were a masterclass in how the world actually distributes credit. Uncle Nine, who bled his hair white saving the city, was made steward with 100 taels. I, who killed the monk and 2 of his disciples, was made an officer with 50, and manager He, who had spent the entire night of the siege hiding under his own bed and contributing nothing but body heat, was promoted to estate head and given 500 taels, 500, for hiding. I looked at that number for a while and I laughed, honestly, because if you can't laugh at the world's accounting, you'll go mad, and because a man on my ledger who gets 500 taels for hiding is just a man storing my money for me until the day I come to collect it. Being an officer suited me fine. Yellow uniform, a little authority, and I still went out and buried the dead with my own hands, because the officer's uniform was the disguise, and the funerals were the whole reason I existed. And being an officer came with the discovery that changed my scale entirely subordinates. I had 2 slots now, and I filled them with Gao Hai and Little Mo, and it turned out that when a subordinate performs a funeral on my behalf, I collect half the reward without lifting the horn. 2 men out burying the city's dead, feeding me a cut of every send-off while I sat home and cultivated. I'd gone from a man with a shovel to a man with an operation. I put the operation's profits into alchemy, into the dragon tiger bone tempering pill formula I'd taken off the monk, and I learned the first great truth of alchemy, which is that it is a machine for setting silver on fire. 6 batches to get it right, 20 tales of ingredients a batch, most of them exploding or fizzling or coming out as expensive gravel. But life experience buys proficiency, and proficiency turned 1 success in 5 into 1 in 3, and eventually I had a shelf of pills that temper bone. I ate 9 of them. My bones went red and dense and rang like struck iron, and I broke through into 6th tier, the internal organ realm, panel reading, aptitude 11, chi and blood 888, internal energy 98. A 6th tier martial artist, in a prefecture city, where 6th tier is the ceiling the great families garrison their strongest men at. And I looked, to every single person in Jiangcheng, like a modest young officer at the mortuary, who was maybe, generously, a 2nd tier fighter with a knack for horns. So I pulled all the way back. I stopped selling talismans at the black market. I stopped selling my tonic. I stopped everything that had ever made Zhufan a name worth a pigeon, because the Red Lotus had noticed a talisman seller once already, and I did not intend to be noticed twice. The strongest man in the city, wearing the face of a nobody, buried in plain sight in the one building the whole city trusted to hold back the dark, down in the mud, where the mistakes don't kill you. Except I wasn't in the mud anymore, was I? Somewhere in the last year, I'd climbed all the way to the top of what a city like this had to offer, one dead man at a time, and nobody had seen me do it. Which was exactly the moment the Red Lotus and a young man in white robes started looking very hard for whoever killed their monk. The yin-yang masters finally traced the source of the whole evil chi plague, and it was almost funny in a bleak way. The river bandits hadn't just stolen the grain. They'd cursed it, soaked it in evil chi, and then the troops had recaptured that same cursed grain and sold it right back to the city to eat. Jiangcheng had been poisoning itself one bowl of rice at a time. I checked my own 5 sacks, found the taint, fed the lot to some very unlucky pigs, and bought clean grain at the new prices. You never fully trust a granary again, I told you. Then the white-robed young master and I finally stood in the same room, and I nearly gave the whole game away with my face. Uncle Nine was buried in the prefect's evil chi work, so when the Xiao family sent for an exorcist, he sent me. The Xiao are one of the 4 great families of Jiangcheng, and they had a problem money couldn't fix. 3 of their 5th-tier guards had died in 7 days, no wounds, bodies gone dry and mummified, and now the corpses were starting to open their eyes and grow fangs. Their head butler took one look at the young officer they'd sent and started sneering, so I turned to leave, which is the fastest way to make a snob call you back, and he called me back. The feng shui of the estate was clean. It wasn't the house, so I did what I do, and let the system show me each guard's last living moment, and in all 3 of them, the same picture. A young man in white robes, gazing at the moon, beautiful and serene, then a withered claw, then the serene smile stretching into something with far too many teeth, the same white robes, the same smile. The man from the vat, the man who murdered Erlang and called it the greater cause. He was killing the Xiao family's own guards, in the Xiao family's own house. I laid the 3 of them to rest, closed their eyes with the requiem, urged the family to cremate rather than bury, and collected a very good set of rewards, 3 5th-tier funerals in a row. And I was still bowing my way out with 200 taels when the man himself walked in. Lin Ji, 2nd young master of the Xiao family, 7th tier at least, white-robed and lovely and smiling, and his eyes went straight to me because my face had done a thing when I saw him, a flicker, half a second, the same tell that had caught the monk's attention over Erlang's coffin. Your expression changed, he said softly, still smiling. Why is that? There is a specific flavor of terror that comes from a very strong person asking you a quiet question you cannot answer honestly. I have felt it exactly twice. And both times I talked my way out with nonsense, and I recommend nonsense highly. Forgive me, young master, I said, and I let my face fill with the dazzled awe of a country boy meeting a movie star. It's only, I read a poem once, off a book at a stall, about the young lords of the 5 mausoleums, silk sleeves and white horses and spring wind, and I always thought it was just words. And then you walked in, and it was as if the poem stood up and put on robes. Flattery, sourced to a black market book I could never be made to produce, unverifiable, and aimed straight at the vanity of a beautiful young man who thinks he's the protagonist of the world. Lin Ji lit up like a lantern. He gave me 100 taels on the spot for the compliment. Vanity is the cheapest lock in the world to pick, and I have a very light touch. I banked the guard rewards on the way home, 10 years of internal energy, a 100-foot flying star hidden weapon art, and an 8-sword breaking technique that fused with my soul-severing blade into the 13 soul-severing blades, yellow rank high grade. The head butler even chased me down to offer 500 more taels if I could find the root cause of the deaths, which put me in the delightful position of knowing exactly what was killing the Xiao guards, that it was the Xiao family's own beloved 2nd young master, and being completely unable to say so to anyone, ever, on pain of a very fast death. So I took some alarm talismans out to the family for their night patrols, cashed nothing, and got out of that house as fast as dignity allowed. Getting out was the easy part. Lin Ji decided to make sure of me. I found out later, the way I find things out, that he and his red-robed enforcer, a woman called Hong Niang, had actually debated killing me that afternoon. The reveal in their conversation chilled me more than the debate did. Lin Ji's cultivation had gone out of control about a month ago, right around the time a certain monk failed to come home, and since then, he'd been the thing hunting his own family's guards for their essence, feeding whatever the great cause needed as it came due. He wasn't hiding a murderer in the house. He was the murderer, and he was getting worse, and the great cause was getting close. Hong Niang didn't kill me outright. She tested me first. She sent an agent, a woman called Qinglin, dressed as a friendly girl of the streets, to get close and read my cultivation by touch, the way a strong hand can feel the current in another body. And I felt her coming, and I did the only thing that has ever kept me alive. I became nobody. I pulled my Xuan turtle concealment down as tight as it would go, softened my skin and muscle, until a 6th-tier body read as a soft 2nd-tier clerk. And then, when she got close and warm and started to probe, I derailed the entire encounter by earnestly asking her to help me solve a math problem about a cage with some rabbits and some roosters in it and a suspicious number of legs. I haggled over the imaginary price of the imaginary rabbits. I was the dullest, cheapest, most harmless young man in the province. Qinglin reported back that the horn boy was a 2nd-tier tendon-forging nobody with no internal energy worth mentioning, completely beneath their notice, which is the single most valuable sentence anyone has ever said about me, and I earned it by pretending I couldn't count roosters. I walked home very calmly and then sat down in my room and discovered my clothes were soaked through with sweat. I'd stood 3 feet from the man who killed my friend, been probed by a cult assassin, and walked out clean, all on the strength of one reward I'd taken years ago instead of Overlord Fist. A country boy in a village once picked the invisibility cloak over the big shiny sword, and everyone, including his own dog, thought he was an idiot. Who's the idiot now, Xiaohei? The dog wrote something in his book. I have genuinely stopped asking. The whole region started coming apart at the seams after that, and the seams were grain. The bandits hit the shipments again. Troops sent to guard the next convoy got ambushed and beaten. Then a whole county town fell to the rebels outright, and grain went from 3 times its old price to 5, and I stood in the mortuary courtyard and told the crew, plainly, to lay in every sack they could carry. They mostly nodded and did nothing, because that's what people do, right up until the day they can't. I laid in my own, quietly, and I taught Xiaohei the Black Wolf Heart method so the dog could climb alongside me, and I trained like the world was ending because it was starting to look like it might be. The 5 elements fist tempered my lungs next, which meant coughing up the black weakness again. Worth it. The fist ticked up to slightly successful, and my aptitude climbed 4 more points to 15. I also carefully went back into the shadows to shop because power costs money, and I needed a specific thing. New face, new name, Shu Yan this time. Shu Fan officially retired. The war had swollen the black market into a monster, cult weapons and a pill frenzy, everyone arming for a collapse. I moved diluted bone-forging pills, 10 times cut, 10 taels each, a couple hundred taels a visit, posing as a modest 4th-tier alchemist, nothing worth a pigeon. And I used the money to walk into Baijinlo. Baijinlo is not the black market. Baijinlo is a pavilion the great forces themselves shop at, where even the waiter pouring your tea is a 2nd-tier martial artist, and I needed it because it stocked the thing I wanted, a spirit serpent's breath technique, profound rank low grade, an organ refining art with 82% compatibility to what I already ran. 600 taels. I funded it by selling 2 of my real, undiluted bone-tempering pills to the shopkeeper, a 6th-tier man named Zhao Heng, who took one look at the quality gap between those and anything a 4th tier could make and understood immediately that I was a budding alchemist worth a great deal more than 300 taels. And then he let me walk out anyway, because as he said to himself as I left, you don't make an enemy of an alchemist over pocket change. That's the whole reason I picked alchemy as my mask. Nobody kills the man who might sell them medicine someday. I fused the serpent's breath into my Xuan turtle concealment and got turtle-snake breath convergence out of it. Profound rank, the perfect 2-in-1 for a man like me. The turtle half hides me, drops my aura through the floor. The snake half refines my organs and builds me up. Conceal and grow on the same breath forever. It had exactly one side effect, which is that the snake breathing did something explosive to my digestion, and I will simply report that Xiaohei woke up in the middle of one cultivation session convinced a thunderstorm had rolled in, sat up, sniffed once, and asked me with his whole offended face whether I had cooked something unspeakable in the room. Cultivation is not always dignified. Nobody tells you that in the storybooks, and the region kept collapsing. Noodles hit 10 coins, 5 times the old price. Another troop column ambushed, another county gone to the rebels. I opened my cellar and shared my hoarded grain with the crew because a drop of kindness gets repaid with the fist, and these were my people, and because a man who watches his friends starve while he eats is not a man I want to be, immortal or not. The Black Wolf Gang, meanwhile, got a new collector to replace the one who mysteriously dissolved to a skeleton in an alley, a brute they called Tiger, and Tiger came down Yangliu Street squeezing everyone twice as hard because a starving city is when the wolves eat best. He came to Uncle Sun, the tofu seller, a gentle old man who couldn't pay, and when Uncle Sun couldn't pay, Tiger reached for the collateral a gang reaches for, the man's daughter, little Xiaohua, to be taken away and worked off against the debt like she was a sack of the missing grain. And Uncle Sun, rather than lose his girl to that, took off the one thing he had left of any value, his dead wife's silver ring, her whole dowry, the last of her he had in the world, and pressed it into Tiger's hand. I stood in the crowd again. I always stand in the crowd. It's the hardest discipline I have, harder than any technique, standing in the crowd that finds something to look at in the other direction, keeping 20 years of patience zipped shut behind my teeth while a good old man buys his daughter back with his dead wife's ring. But the Black Wolf Gang is a tree, and Tiger is a leaf, and the day of revenge is the day they can't stop you, not 1 hour sooner. I wrote Tiger's name down. The list is long. The list always gets paid. I put my rage where rage belongs, into the work, refining my organs on the turtle snake breath night after night. And then the war finally did the one thing that turned all this misery, for me specifically, into a flood tide of opportunity. The dead soldiers started coming home. The martyrs' shrine overflowed. The county's fallen came to the mortuary by the cartload, officers and commandants and common spearmen, and the panels opened one after another, a whole army's worth of funerals waiting for a horn. A county military commandant named Fan San, 3rd tier, Mandarin duck swords, and a military fist on his menu. And behind him a line of the war dead stretching out the mortuary door and down the road, every one of them a life, every one of them mine to send off. The city was dying, the kingdom was cracking, and the funeral man had never in either of his lives been so well fed. The war dead taught me a new kind of fear. I buried an army's worth of them, and every soldier gave me a slice of a battle I hadn't seen, and one battle in particular I have never been able to forget. General He Yong, a 7th tier commander on a white horse, had the ragtag rebels routed, actually winning, right up until a short, white-bearded old man came down out of the sky on a flying sword and dropped lightning on him. Then the old man's talisman burned into a firebird and swept the general and his men to ash, armor melted to slag, and a black banner unrolled and loosed a windful of ghosts across the survivors. A flying sword, lightning from an old man in the air. The rebels had a cultivator. Up until that moment, the immortals had been a rumor Mr. Lin told me about 20 years and a lifetime ago, a top shelf I was slowly climbing toward. Now one of them was on the enemy's side, on screen, turning generals to slag, and I understood in my gut for the first time that everything I'd built, 6th tier, Vajra armor, all of it, was a sandcastle in front of that tide. That's a specific dread, learning there's a whole rank of the game above the ceiling you've been calling the sky. I banked the soldiers' rewards, fused a 6 harmonies fist into my art to make the 6 harmony 5 elements fist, perfected my organs to the top of 6th tier, and slammed straight into a wall. The 7th tier, the divine transformation realm, the first rung of the true masters, would not open on brute force. Ranks 3 through 6 are the chi and blood realm, the body. 7 through 9 are divine transformation, where the spirit itself starts to wake, and you do not bull your way in. I ground my internal energy up past 600 on the Black Wolf Heart method and sat at the wall and waited, because waiting is what I do. And then it was the new year, and I want to stop the war for a page, because the war stopped for a page too, and what was left when it stopped was the good part. Snow came down over a starving city. People were stripping bark off the trees to eat. The rebels were a dozen miles out, and prices were a bad joke. And I went New Year shopping anyway because you have to mark the turning of the year, or you forget you're a person. And in the market, Xiao Hei stopped in front of a stall of colored paper windmills, one of those spinning pinwheels on a stick, bright red and yellow and blue, and he looked at it, and then he looked at my worried face doing the math on grain, and he said nothing. My immortal dog, who keeps a grudge book and understands every word I say, and once demanded to know if I'd cooked something unspeakable, wanted a child's paper toy and kept his mouth shut about it because he saw I was worried about money. So I went back later without him and bought the windmill, and I tied it to his tail, and he spent the rest of the day trotting around with it spinning behind him, ridiculous, delighted, the bells on it jingling, and I laughed until my face hurt. A man and his dog in a dying city, on the last day of a bad year, relying on each other and one paper windmill. If you ever want to know what I was actually fighting for under all the schemes and the ledgers, it was that. Just that. New Year's Eve, the crew had scattered to their own lives, Uncle Nine off with the widow's son, who he was very obviously and very sweetly courting, and it came down to just 3 of us at the mortuary. Me, Xiao Hei, and Old Mo, the lame drunk body collector with the bleakest mouth in the province. Old Mo broke out a jar he'd been hiding for 20 years, a daughter's red wine, the kind a family buries when a girl is born and digs up on her wedding day, and a beggar's chicken, and we ate and drank in the snow, and the old cynic got honest for once. He'd left his family young, he told me, done something he couldn't take back, and never dared go home again. He had a granddaughter out there somewhere he'd never met, and after the new year, he said, if the world held together that long, he was finally going to go find her and give her a proper dowry before he died. He guarded that red wine gourd on his hip like it was made of glass. Her dowry, he said, it's all saved up in here. And the whole night, he treated me like the grandson-in-law he wished he had. Ate slow so I'd eat more. Told me the truths he'd never tell a stranger. Poured me cup after cup of that honey-clear 20-year wine, and it was good wine, spirit wine almost, good enough that I felt my stalled cultivation loosen half a hair at the wall, though I didn't say so. I've buried a lot of people. I've learned to hear it when a man tells you his last plans out loud, the tenderness that comes into an old voice when it's finally decided to go home. I heard it in old Mo that night, and I told myself I was imagining it, and I poured him another cup, and we watched Xiaohei's windmill spin in the snow, and for a few hours in the worst year of a dying city, 3 of us were warm. I would give a great deal to have that night back, but that's not how the ledger works. The ledger only ever runs one direction, and the new year was already turning, and out in the snow, a caravan of red coffins was already on the road to my door. They came dressed as grief. A caravan on New Year's night, red coffins, a sad story about brothers lost to illness, and good bribe money pressed into my hand and old Mo's to handle the burials quietly. And I lifted the horn to sound the rite, and the panel told me the truth the way it always does, because you cannot lie to a funeral. There were no dead men in those coffins. The first 2 were empty. The last 3 held bronze-armored corpses, the exact make as the one wearing Erlang's stolen strength. The same cult. The Red Lotus, back at my door. On the one night the mortuary was nearly empty, I signaled Xiaohei out the dog hole with a letter before I did anything else, because I'd learned the lesson of the first siege, get the message out first, fight second. Then I had to get old Mo clear, and I couldn't tell him why without tipping the enemy that I could read their coffins, so I invented a reason. Time to go worship the back mountain earth god for the new year. Old man, tradition, come on. And I walked him out into the snow toward what I hoped was safety. It wasn't safety. 2 men were waiting for us on the mountain, and they were both 7th tier, a scarred one and a hook-nosed one who called himself Brother Xiao, and they'd been sent, they said, by His Excellency, for the greater good. 2 7th tier killers. I was a 6th tier stuck at the wall. Even with every card I owned, I could not beat 2 of them at once, and they knew it, and they came in smiling. And then old Mo, the lame drunk, the body collector, the cynic who told a starry-eyed kid there were no heroes in the Jianghu, tore open his shirt. 9 dragons were tattooed across him, coiling from shoulder to hip, faded but unmistakable, and the 2 7th-tier assassins went white, because those 9 dragons had a name from before I was ever born into this world. Long Feihu, the 9-dragon blade, a 9th-tier grandmaster, a legend, a man the whole martial world believed had been poisoned to death decades ago by the 5 Poison sect. He hadn't died. He'd survived the poison the only way it could be survived, by never once using his internal energy, dropping all the way down to a lame nobody hauling corpses in a mortuary, hiding in plain sight in the one place nobody looks twice. For decades. And the moment he circulated his energy to fight, the old poison would wake with it, and it would kill him. He knew that. He tore his shirt open anyway. Go, kid, he said, and there was no drunk left in his voice at all, just the 9-dragon blade. He pressed his red wine gourd into my hands, the dowry, the granddaughter he'd meant to find after the new year, Jiangjia village near Sanhe town. Look inside, promise me. He took my ring knife out of my belt for himself. And then he grabbed the back of my collar, and he threw me, off the mountain and clear of it, and turned to face 2 7th-tier killers with a borrowed knife and a body full of waking poison and 40 years of grief. I want to be honest about what a death like that is, because a lesser storyteller would give you the blow-by-blow and cheapen it. I'm not going to. He was the 9-dragon blade for one last time, and it cost him everything the poison had been waiting decades to take, and he killed one of them and broke the other before it took him. And he did it so a horn boy he'd decided to love could live. That's the whole shape of it. The old man who said there were no heroes was, it turned out, the only real one I ever met in that city, and he'd spent his whole hidden life proving his own bleak philosophy wrong on purpose, quietly, for a stranger. Repay a peach with a plum. He'd repaid a debt I never even knew I'd lent him. Grief is a fuel like any other. I've learned to burn it clean. The hook-nosed one, Lin Tai, 5 poison claws, came down off the mountain after me, wounded by old Mo but alive. Sure, the horn boy was the easy part of his night. So I showed him he was wrong. White Tiger slays the invincible, all of it, no more hiding, and I knocked a 7th-tier assassin back 5 full steps, internal energy pouring off me like a man who'd cultivated for decades, and I watched his certainty crack. He escalated, swallowed a live centipede whole to spike his 5 poison's energy, and his claws started seeping black marks straight through my invulnerable skin, poison finding a way where blades couldn't. He was still stronger than me, Then a bell rang out in the dark, and a bronze-armored corpse loomed up behind me, and Lin Tai laughed, because his master's ambush had arrived. Another bronze corpse come to finish the job. Except it wasn't his master's corpse. It was mine. It was Kunyu, my Kunyu, Erlong's strength, following its master through the snow the way it always did, and I let Lin Tai keep believing it was an ally for exactly as long as I needed to break his ribs at close range. Then I looked at the thing he thought was his, and I said, Kunyu, kill him. The look on his face. You thought I had 3 or 4 tricks up my sleeve, I told him, while my dead friend closed the distance. I had 7 or 8. I let Kunyu finish it, and I expelled the black poison out of my body with the Black Wolf Heart method, and I stood in the snow breathing hard over the man who helped kill the 9-dragon blade. I buried Lin Tai myself, and here's the strange gift of that night. He got a funeral panel, an enemy send-off, which shouldn't work, except that as he died, he'd sneered, "Come collect my body if you're able." And it turns out a taunt like that counts as permission, the same as a stranger's voice in the woods answering back. The system heard it as a yes. 92% attendance, because I do a very sincere funeral for a man I hated. 2 doors open. A swimming serpent lightness art that fused into soaring through the void, and 10 years of martial experience, and the 10 years was exactly the crowbar I needed. It cracked my wall. I broke through into 7th tier, the great circulation realm, the first true rung of divine transformation, standing over the grave of one of the men who'd killed my friend. The Xiao in his name told me the last thing I needed to know too. Lin Tai was a branch of the Jiangcheng Xiao family, which meant one of the 4 great families of my city wasn't just hiding a monster of a young master, it was in bed with the rebels all the way down. I fed Lin Tai's corpse to Kunyu for Old Mo, and I went back up the mountain in the snow to find what was left of the 9-dragon blade, with his wine gourd heavy on my hip and a promise in it I fully intended to keep. The red coffins were never about 3 bronze corpses. They were bait, and the real thing came at midnight. The fake caravan's leader, a bearded man with an accountant at his elbow and 18 feng shui masters at his back, fired a 6-yin corpse fiend formation off 6 coffins planted around the mortuary. Evil chi beacons, all of them, 10 times the golden dragon monk's storm, enough to turn every corpse in the building into a fiend and hand Zhang Cheng to their grand marshal in a single night. And the whole time, this was the plan the black market evil talisman buyers had been feeding back when I sold anti-evil charms and never guessed the buyers were rebels stockpiling for exactly this. But I'd sent Xiao Hei out the dog hole first. First rule of the second siege. Get the message out, then fight. My dog ran a letter through the snow to Uncle Nine, and Uncle Nine ran it to the prefect, and the prefect emptied the barracks. 3,000 of the Xuanwu army came down on that formation under a 9th-tier general named Gao Yong, with Deputy Mo and the 4 families' fighters behind them. And it turns out a cult formation built to feed on a sleepy mortuary does very poorly against 3,000 crossbows and a real general. They broke the fiends with volleys and numbers. The bearded leader ran. Gao Yong put a bolt through him on the way out. I wasn't watching the battle. I was up the mountain, digging in the snow, and I found what I was looking for, Old Mo's body, and buried in the chest of the rebel he'd killed at the end. My ring knife, his last strike, the 9 dragon blades' final cut. I carried him down myself. I buried Long Feihu the next day, and I played him the old song, the one about the dew on the leek, how easily it dries, how it falls at dawn and is gone by noon and comes back tomorrow while the man does not. I understood that song better than I ever had. The panel that opened over him nearly stopped my heart. Long Feihu, the 9 dragon blade. 9th tier, the spirit realm, waned but never broken. Life experience plus 10,001. 10,001 from a lame drunk who hauled corpses and poured me wine and threw me off a mountain to save my life. 82% came to mourn him, 85% satisfied, 2 doors open, and I took a disguise technique and the recipe for a Blazing Sun spirit wine, because of course the last thing the old drunk gave me was a way to make better wine. He'd have laughed at that. I did, a little. Then I stopped. The prefect gave Uncle Nine and me 500 taels each for saving the city again, and threw a banquet at the Chunfeng Tower, Bear Paw, and Abalone. I ate all of it, because grief makes me hungry, and a free feast is a free feast, and I ignored the courtesan they seated beside me, Lan Fen. Women only slow a man down, and I had a wine gourd on my hip with a promise in it. Old Mo first. Everything else could wait. But the banquet talk told me the shape of the whole war, and the shape was bad. The rebels had a cultivator, and the cultivator kept coming back no matter who hit him. The capital couldn't help, tied up in a war with the Qi kingdom up north, 6 months away at best. The 4 great families, Liu and Zhao and Xiao and An, were all quietly hedging their bets, keeping a foot in each camp. And the prefect, Song Chengru, had done the one thing left to do. He'd sent a petition up the mountain to the Tai sword sect, begging the immortals for a celestial master to come fight fire with fire, 1 to 5 months out if they came at all. Immortals against immortals over the corpse of my city, and a rebel warlord hiding somewhere inside its walls, licking a crossbow wound. I had a promise to keep for a dead friend, but I also had a warlord to find, and I've never been able to leave a thread on my ledger dangling when I can see exactly where it goes. I saw the war's real face at that banquet actually. Not the battle. The waste. Whole platters of bear paw and wine, barely touched, dumped into swill buckets out back, while 3 streets over a starving woman offered herself to a stranger for 1 sesame cake. I bought her the cakes, slipped coins in with them so she could keep her spine and call it a sale. Uncle Nine, when I told him, just nodded. Clear conscience and reasonable, he said. For men like us, that's the whole ceiling. You can't fix a war. You can buy one woman some cakes. Then the war ate my livelihood. The rebels reached the outskirts, the outside city mortuary shut its doors, and just like that my funeral pipeline dried up. I rented a house in the city and brewed my blazing sun wine to pass the time and crawled toward 8th tier at a snail's pace because a man who can't bury anyone can't grow. So I went where the dead still were. Uncle Nine had retired to court his widow, and he handed his private clients down to me, the White Soul Guardian, and the first client was the Black Wolf Gang. They wanted me to bury their vice leader Xu Feng, an 8th tier man who died, quote, mysteriously, 300 tiles, and while I was at it, the other vice leader, Jiang Gu Dragon, pulled me aside and quietly offered me 1,000 taels to scatter Xu Feng's soul so it could never speak. I said no. Partly because my master's precept forbids it, mostly because a man who pays you 1,000 taels to silence a corpse is a man telling you the corpse knows something. I scared him off it instead, planted a fake omen, a red phoenix curse that would fall on anyone who desecrated the body, and watched Jianggu Dragon go pale and back away. Superstition is a wonderful leash for a superstitious man. Xu Feng's funeral told me everything. His last memory was a meeting. The Black Wolf leader, Ti Shan, telling his officers that the rebels wanted the gang as inside agents when the city fell, that several powers in Zhongcheng had already sided with the Red Lotus. Xu Feng called it treason and refused, so the whole leadership killed him for it. Jianggu Dragon's knife first, Ti Shan and the elders finishing. The men who hired me to find their brother's killer were the killers, and now I had it confirmed, written on the inside of a dead man's eyes. 2 of the city's powers were traitors for certain, the Xiao family and the Black Wolf Gang. Xu Feng also left me a gift I'd been hunting for years, a real internal mind cultivation technique, the Sirius method, 99% compatible, and it fused in for free and stacked my internal energy up toward 40 years worth. The gang's own murdered officer arming me to bury the gang. The ledger loves a circle. Now I had a picture, and a picture is a hunting map. Somewhere in the city, the rebel warlord, the bearded man Gao Yang shot on the way out of the siege, was hiding and healing. I found him the patient way. I tailed a furtive divine strength disciple carrying arrow wound medicine and a food box through the back alleys, night after night, until he led me to a hidden room and a bearded man too injured to move. The warlord himself. And standing over him, my whole plan assembled itself in one clean piece. I could kill the warlord, and I could frame the traitors for it, and I could set the traitor gangs at each other's throats so they'd be too busy bleeding to open the gates for the rebels. 1 body, 3 problems solved. I mastered Old Mo's disguise technique first, pigskin and false hair, until I could wear another man's face. Then I killed the real medicine runner, took his clothes and his food box, and walked into the wolf's den wearing the wolf's own errand boy. The warlord was paranoid, which I respected, and which I'd planned for. He made me eat the food first and drink the medicine first, testing for poison, and it was all clean because the poison was never in the food. He noticed I lacked the cult's lotus seal tattoo and attacked, a Vajra fist, and my internal energy met his and matched it, and I watched the horror land. This isn't my errand boy. He drew a divine sword, the 7 Fiends blade, and it sheared my knife like tofu, and he came at me with a 7/7 stars chasing the moon that would have ended a lesser man. And then his legs buckled, because the poison was on the gauze. The special pain-killing bandage on his arrow wound, the one thing a paranoid man never thinks to guard, because he guards his mouth and forgets his skin. It had been seeping in slow the whole time, and the moment he exerted himself in combat, his own pounding heart pumped it everywhere at once. I put a Bodhi seed through his guard, disarmed him, hit him with a white tiger carrying 40 years of serious energy, and the rebel warlord did not get up. I took his head to be sure because I don't leave threads. I took the 7 Fiends blade too, a real divine sword, my new right hand, 1,000 taels. An Evil Path artifact booklet on the gourds and the coffin formations, and a bronze token stamped with a blood-red lotus and the number 8, which matched the iron 19 I'd taken off senior brother Liu ages ago. The cult had ranks. I was collecting them. The rest was arithmetic. I claimed the warlord's 3,000 tel bounty at the yamen wearing an old man's face, took it in gold so it couldn't be traced, and let the heads hang at the gate. And the divine strength sect's coroner examined the warlord's corpse and found he'd been killed by serious internal energy, the Black Wolf Gang's signature art, which I had, and they didn't know I had. And now the Divine Strength sect was absolutely certain the Black Wolf Gang had murdered a rebel warlord they were secretly allied with, and came demanding the killer, or war. I gave the fire a little more air. I opened my own funeral parlor in the South City, and hired Gao Hai and Little Mo and 30 helpers as disguised work relief so I could feed starving people without the land-grabbing families noticing the charity. Then I went out at night. I killed a few Divine Strength men with serious energy and a few Black Wolf men with Divine Strength methods until the two traitor gangs hated each other past any hope of reconciling. They went to war in the streets, exactly as planned. The rebels' two biggest inside agents in Zhangcheng, tearing each other apart instead of opening the gates, buying my dying city weeks. It did not know it owed to a horn boy with a grudge and a very good disguise kit. And my parlor, sitting in the middle of a fresh gang war, did the best business in the city. Both sides kept sending me their dead. I kept burying them. And every single one made me stronger, which is the joke at the bottom of my whole life. I turned two armies of killers on each other, and then I got paid to bury the results, and the results made me a better killer. Somewhere old Mo was laughing at me. No good men in the Jianghu, kid. Not even you. Especially not you. I perfected the frame. Killed a few key relatives on each side wearing the other side's art, an illegitimate son here, a favorite lover there, until the two gangs couldn't have reconciled if a god ordered them to. My parlor swelled to 50 staff. I gave the prefect's man Ma Jian 10% of it, and the Dragon Constable 10, and Deputy Mo 10 kept 70, and bought myself a wall of official protection, an immortal in the making, reduced to a district businessman handing out bribes. Power is just freedom you have to buy in installments. Some nights I practiced my saber under the moon out of pure frustration, and one of those nights a plain knife cut clean through a stone pillar, and my blade woke up. Soul-severing saber intent. I sever the shackles of the mortal world, fitting for a man drowning in them. Then the rebels made their big push, and it broke on nothing, because I'd already gutted the thing it was supposed to land on. I seeded rumors that the traitor gangs had defected, panicked the city into begging an innate grandmaster named Huang Yun out of retirement, and when tens of thousands of rebels stormed the walls, not one inside gate opened for them. No Black Wolf, no Xiaomen. Just Huang Yun shattering the Evil Path Cultivator's Firebird with 18 sword strikes and a wall of 8 ox crossbows behind him. The rebels broke. The city held, waiting for its promised immortal. The prefect, grateful, gave me 5,000 taels and an official post running the city's corpse collection, which handed my funeral pipeline back with a government seal on it. 80 years of internal energy, 7,000 caddies of strength, 7th tier, perfected. Business, as they say, was good. And then I rode out to collect the dead from the fields, and the fields cured me of ever thinking business was the point. I want to tell you about one woman because she is the truest thing in this whole story, and I've never gotten her out of my head. The road out to the fields ran through a landscape I don't have good words for. Unburied dead in the ditches and the paddies, so many that the crows had gotten lazy about it. My official corpse collection meant something different out here than it had in the city. In the city, a body is a funeral. Out here, a body was just one of 1,000, and the 1,000 had stopped being a number and started being weather. And in the middle of all of it, one woman was still doing the arithmetic of grief by hand. She was burying her son. She was so thin she was barely there, a scarecrow with a shovel, and she was digging a small grave beside 3 others, and I got the whole picture from the graves and from her flat, empty, used-up voice. The first grave was her in-laws, hounded to death by the Black Wolf Gang's debts before the war even started. The second was her husband, beheaded by the rebels who came after. The third she was filling now, her boy, who had eaten grass, and then bark, and then clay, and died of the clay in her arms. She told me all of it without once changing her tone, the way you'd read a receipt, because she had gone so far past feeling that the words didn't cost her anything anymore. And when she finished patting down her son's small grave, she picked the shovel back up and started digging a 5th one, a long one, a person-sized one, for herself, so she could lie down in it and finally be done with the whole exhausting business of surviving. I didn't have a scheme for her. There's no scheme for that. I got off my cart and I played her a lament, the real one, all of it, and I let it say the thing I couldn't. Then I offered her work at the parlor, a room, food, and when that didn't reach her, because nothing reaches a person that far gone, I found the one thread that did. Someone has to carry on the incense, I told her. Someone has to remember them. Your in-laws, your husband, your boy. If you lie down in that hole, the last person who ever knew their names goes into it with you, and then it's like they were never here at all. You're not allowed to be that. You're the incense now. And she stopped digging. And this woman who had gone so far past grief that she'd come out numb on the other side, this woman finally broke and wept, standing over 5 graves in an empty field, and the weeping was the first alive thing she'd done in a long time. People argue about whether the rebels were right, you know, whether 1,000 years of the poor starving under the great families justified burning it all down. I buried both sides of that argument for a year. And I'll tell you what a year of graves taught me. The old order was cruel and the new order was worse, and in between the two of them, a woman digs a 5th hole in an empty field, and no ideology on either side ever once dug her out. Only a horn boy who used to be nobody, and a lament, and a reason to stand up. That's the only politics I believe in anymore. I was still full of that when Inspector An Shuksain arrested my whole team at the city gate. He was in family, and I'd displaced his uncle's funeral business years back, and he'd been nursing the grudge ever since. And now, with the gate cleared for an arriving immortal and the prefect's man unable to stop him, he clapped my whole crew in irons on a nothing pretext. I let him. I sat in the shackles and eyed the 8-ox crossbows on the wall and did the math on how many I could take with me, and I bided my time, because time is the one thing I always have. Then 2 beams of light came down out of the sky. Tai sword sect, the promised immortals, at last, a blue flying sword, and a young man riding it. And the young man landed and ignored the whole assembled city and asked one question into the crowd. Is my benefactor still alive? I knew the voice before I placed the face. Gu Wen. The lean, quiet boy whose mother I buried for 46 coins, the one I found under a tree at the end of his rope, the one I pressed 20 coins on and called it a refund so he could keep his spine. He'd walked off toward Jimming Mountain to try for something bigger than a debt and a grave, and he'd knelt 3 days at the gate until they took him, and now he was an intersect immortal of the Tai sword sect, riding a sword through the clouds, and on his wrist, on a red string, he still wore 2 of those 20 coins. He'd kept them for years. He'd come back the first moment he could, to find out if the man who gave them to him was still breathing. He found me in An Shuksain's shackles. His face changed, and the An family inspector who'd chained his benefactor did not get to explain himself, because an immortal's sword is very fast, and an immortal's patience for men who chain his savior is very short, and Shuksain went down like any other man, family name and all. Gu Wen freed me with his own hands, refused the prefect's frantic banquet, and went home with me instead, because the only person in the whole shining immortal world he actually wanted to see was a funeral man who'd once shown him a single act of kindness on the worst day of his life. I'd spent years telling Xiaohei, we don't touch the immortals yet. We build the base first, we wait. And here was an immortal, landing at my feet, because a lifetime ago I'd handed a broke kid 20 coins and told him to go be somebody. It's the best investment I ever made, and I didn't even make it on purpose. I made it because third sister-in-law once gave a starving boy a bowl of dumplings, and it stuck. A drop of kindness, a fist in return. Sometimes the fist comes back down out of the sky on a flying sword and cuts your chains off. Gu Wen, it turned out, was a genius and a disaster in equal measure. He tested me with an immortal stone and delivered the one piece of bad news I'd been dreading. I have no spiritual root. None. The thing that lets a person cultivate the immortal path, the ticket up the last flight of stairs, and I simply don't have one. Which meant the ordinary road to immortality was closed to me forever, which meant, and I thought this the very same second, that I would have to find another road, and the road I know best is the one that runs through other people's funerals. If I can't be born with a spiritual root, I'll bury a cultivator and take one. Note it down. It becomes important. Off Gu Wen killing Shushan so casually, I understood a thing I'd been circling, that real courage is just what strength feels like from the inside, and my body agreed and cracked open the 8th tier, divine valor, my spirit widening until I could hear insects walking. The prefect, meanwhile, took one look at Gu Wen, refusing every honor to go live with a funeral man, and concluded we were lovers, which horrified me and delighted the entire parlor. Gu Wen didn't leave. He had exactly one friend in the immortal world, or this one, and it was me, and he was going to stand awkwardly next to me until I got used to it. I never fully got used to it, but I stopped minding. I sat on what I knew about the Xiao family being traitors in the end. I had no proof a court would take, and proving it meant revealing how I know what I know, and revealing the record is the one thing I will never do. So I filed the Xiao under later, with everything else, and I went to visit my henpecked master and his fierce kind pregnant wife and drink blazing sun, wine, and toast Old Mo. Uncle Nine still wouldn't teach me the 3rd volume of his sutra. Every craft has its doom, he said, and poured another cup. Look at Old Mo. The 9 Dragon Blade, dead of his own greatness. Some knowledge shortens the life it's supposed to protect. He showed me his heirloom instead, a peachwood sword struck by lightning. With it, he swept a whole cloud of mosquitoes into a talisman circle without once rising from his chair. And he told me the old lineage's secret. The ancient geomancers had been the equals of the immortal Foundation establishment masters once, men who could move mountains and reroute rivers. Then the whole art withered, for the same reason the Blood Warriors did. It gives you power, and it takes your years. He promised me the lightning-struck sword when he was gone. I told him not to talk like that. I should have listened to my own bad feeling. I never do. For a while it even looked like we were winning. Gu Wen's sword and his frosty senior sister, an 8th-level immortal who doted on him and kept misreading the two of us exactly like everyone else did, routed the rebels' evil path cultivator at Anping. He fled, kept reviving somehow, but he fled. Counties came back, grain dropped. I buried war heroes, stacked a Beidou 5 elements fist onto my art, dodged Uncle Nine's relentless matchmaking and his genuinely inedible cooking, and let myself believe, for one stupid stretch, that the worst was behind us. The worst was not behind us. The worst had been building the whole time, and it came all at once, at night, the way the worst always does. 20,000 evil corpses rose inside the walls in a single hour. I waded into them with the 7 Fiends blade, and in the middle of the slaughter, Shameless, he grabbed my leg begging for help, and I stepped over him and very deliberately helped a fallen corpse to its feet instead. The ledger keeps its own hours. Then the ground itself heaved, the whole south wall breached, and the Qingjiang River, the great river that had cradled the city for 1,000 years, turned in its bed and came for us as a wall of black water. On a hill above the drowning city, 2 men watched it happen and narrated their own genius, because villains cannot help themselves. Scarface, and a Xiao family man, laying out immortal Master Mo's masterpiece. The 20,000 corpses were chaos. The trap was for the 2 Taiyi immortals, and to breach the wall and flood the city they'd burned the lifespans of 18 feng shui masters to fire a Tiansha dragon severing formation and reroute the river. Drown Jiang Cheng, harvest all that death and evil qi into silver-armored flying zombies and a gold-armored corpse king, use the king to kill the exhausted immortals, and then take Jiangzhou, and then 15 prefectures of the southeast. And then, the Xiaoman said it out loud, their saint might ascend the throne. A whole city, 100,000 souls, spent as reagents in one alchemy to make a young master a king. And the only thing standing between the flood and the city was 18 enemy feng shui masters diverting it, and my master. Uncle Nine found me in the water. He was calm, which is how I knew. He told me quietly that he could feel it, that he was one single step from becoming a true geomancer, that his whole life had walked him to this exact riverbank, and that a man doesn't get to feel a thing like that and then walk away from it. He'd already said goodbye to Shenru, his pregnant wife, and he told me what he'd told her, that he loved her, and that after he was gone, she should remarry and live, and not spend her years mourning a corpse. Then he put the 2nd volume of the Yin Talisman Sutra into my hands, his life's real inheritance, and gave me my orders in the voice that only came out when he meant to be obeyed. Save Shenru, get her to Qixia Mountain, then out of Zhangzhou. The legacy does not break, you live. Same order as the first siege. He'd been giving me that order since the night we met. Then he took up his lightning-struck peachwood sword, the heirloom he'd promised me, and my gentle henpecked master who'd never risen past the 3rd martial tier in his life, rose off the ground, levitated, the old geomancer's power, the mountain mover's art, waking in him all at once at the very end, and he flew into the breach, into the wall of black water, alone. I did what he ordered. I always end up doing what these old men order. That's the terrible thing. They love you, and then they make you leave them. I got Shenru onto my back and I ran, and I leapt the flooding wall past the bronze corpses, and I didn't look back at the breach, because if I'd looked back I'd have turned around, and turning around would have wasted his whole trade. They ambushed us on the far side, a pit of poisoned stakes and a crossbow line under a 7th tier divine strength man named Mo Lei, who took one look at the pregnant woman on my back and decided he wanted her. Shenru, half out of her mind with grief, tried to end herself rather than be taken, and I stopped her hand and said the only thing that would land, you carry his child, you carry his line, you do not get to be the last chapter. Then I blocked the whole crossbow volley, and I brought the soul-shattering saber intent down on Mo Lei and cut him and his 1,000 caddy hammer clean apart, and I dissolved his squad to dust and had Xiaohei erase our tracks, and I carried Uncle Nine's wife out into the dark while behind us the impossible happened. The flood turned. By dawn, the black water had a new road, new hills stood where no hills had been, and the Qingjiang ran a different course than it had run for 1,000 years, away from the city. He did it. My master, one step from geomancer, spent that single step to move a river off 100,000 people, and he did not come back out of it. They found a broken peachwood sword and a scrap of his robe. That was all. Huang Yun, the innate grandmaster, confirmed it for me in a low voice, that Kuiji had diverted the river and broken the enemy's formation and been devoured by the backlash of the earth he'd commanded. Every core traitor, the Xiaomen, the divine strength officers, the Black Wolf leadership had vanished into the chaos of that night, gone to ground with their rebellion. I built him a cenotaph since there was no body. I played him the song about the dew on the leek, and I finally, fully understood it. The dew that dries at dawn, the man who does not come back tomorrow the way the dew does. And over his empty grave, I made a promise that was not a funeral man's gentle promise. The rebels die. The Xiao Saint dies. Every one of them who spent this city as reagents, I put in the ground myself. I don't care how long it takes. I have forever. Then I opened the second volume he died to hand me, and it was not more talismans. It was the geomancer's cultivation method, the old mountain-moving art, and when I read it, the record itself opened a whole new page inside me, a second profession, Feng Shui Master, Tier 2. My master's last gift wasn't a weapon. It was a second road up the mountain, for a man born with no spiritual route to climb the first one. Even dying, he was still finding me a way forward. I sent his wife to safety with Gu Wen, who came back wrecked with guilt for having been lured off into a valley trap the night it all happened. I didn't blame him. The enemy was the enemy. A friend who got fooled is still a friend. I left Shenru and her unborn child in his care and the widow Lotuses, and one night, without telling anyone where I was going, I walked out of what was left of Zhangcheng and into the mountains after the men who drowned it. I had a rebellion to take apart from the inside, and I just learned the price these old men pay to move a river. I intended to make the men who made him pay it understand personally exactly what it had cost. You don't storm a rebel army, you get invited in. I tracked a rebel squad through the Tianmu Mountains for 2 weeks, learning a corporal named Ma Cheng by heart, and then I killed him and became him, disguise and a rougher voice and every detail of his life, because I'd buried him and a funeral tells me everything. Then, I did the oldest trick in the book. I rescued his superior, a man named Gao Ziming, from a spot of danger I could see coming, and rode his gratitude straight into Commander Han Chi's camp, 300 rebels deep in the hills. Gao Ziming conveniently died in the next battle, which snipped the last thread that could have questioned my story. And then I did the thing I do, and it worked better than any blade. I buried their dead. Rebel soldiers are still soldiers, still boys who die scared and far from home, and nobody was giving them a proper send-off. So I did. I dug the graves, I played the horn, I gave every dead conscript the dignity his own commanders wouldn't spend the time on, and the camp fell in love with me. Liu the philanthropist, they called me. Liu the great-hearted. They had no idea the philanthropist was cataloging their entire order of battle one funeral at a time. Squad leader, then camp gravedigger, then trusted, then invisible, the most invisible a man can be, a beloved one. And every rebel funeral poured rewards into me until my 8th tier sat at 99%, one breath from the 9th. The record mapped the whole rotten thing for me from the inside. The rebels were 3 armies wearing one coat, the Red Lotus sect elite, the Song family at their core, a vast mass of conscripted starving refugees who just wanted to eat, and the defectors, my old friends, the Divine Strength sect, and the Xiao family, and the Black Wolf gang, all of them hedged in, all of them despising each other. A snake with 3 heads, and I was already whispering in all 3 ears. To go deeper, I had to reach the true base, Peach Blossom Valley, and Peach Blossom Valley was hidden behind a 12-eyed shadow-concealing feng shui formation that no ordinary man could even see. But I'm not an ordinary man anymore. I'm a Tier 2 feng shui master with a dead master's 2nd volume in my blood, and I saw every eye of it, and I broke one carrying a corpse past it like it was nothing. The price of admission to the core was cultivating their blood fiend technique, which binds you to the sect body and soul, lets their feng shui masters make a traitor explode from the inside with a word. Every man who took it was signing his own leash. I took it and didn't lose a wink of sleep, because you cannot leash a man who cannot die of it, and their whole control system was built on a fear I simply don't have. I even picked up the Blood Fiend 9 Revolutions off a dead officer, a real combat multiplier, filed it with my other trump cards, and then I reached the War Council, and the War Council handed me the best joke of the entire rebellion. There they all were. Lin Ji, the beautiful white-robed young master, commander-in-chief of 20,000. Mao Hai Dragon and Tai Shan, the traitor gang bosses turned brigade commanders, and then the Grand Marshal himself swept in, the mastermind of the whole Southern Rebellion, Han He, the fallen dynasty's own blood, and I looked up at the most wanted man in 15 prefectures. It was Old Man Pan, the black market bookseller, the mustachioed operator who opened every haggle at 80,000 taels and once sold me a 20-tael fusion fragment for 3 coins in a dirty book. The Grand Marshal of the Red Lotus, the man whose cult had been chasing a talisman seller called Shu Fan across my whole city for years, was the crooked old peddler I'd bought the talisman selling art from in the first place. I had to physically school my face, and the 9th tier marshal caught the flicker anyway and asked, sharp, why I looked at him like that. Forgive me, Marshal, I said, all humble rebel corporal. You just remind me of an old friend from home, a merchant, sold the finest genuine counterfeit goods you ever saw. Pan's eyes narrowed, then decided a gravedigger couldn't possibly know anything, and moved on. I have talked my way past a monk, a cult assassin, and now a rebel king, all with the same weapon, which is a completely honest sentence aimed like an arrow. It's my favorite trick. Nobody ever believes you'd tell the truth to their face. Han Ki, my commander, pitched the marshal on funeral battalions, engineering and burial and feng shui all in one corps, a scheme designed to make Han Ki look good, and the marshal approved it, which handed me the single most valuable thing an infiltrator can hold, a free movement pass. I could go anywhere in the rebel structure now, carrying corpses, carrying letters, carrying my dog through the lines with intelligence sewn into his collar. I cultivated the first revolution of the blood fiend art for a 50% burst, and I settled in to gut a rebellion from its own quartermaster's tent. Then came Anping, and Anping is where I learned why their immortal wouldn't die. The rebels feinted the Xuanwu army out of position and threw the Tiger Brigade and a wave of bronze corpses at Anping's walls, and up on those walls, waiting, was Huang Yun, the innate grandmaster, cleaving bronze corpses 2 at a time. Then Immortal Master Mo descended, fireballs and a 5-ghost banner, and nearly broke even Feng. And then my Gu Wen came down out of the sky with his blue sword, and his senior sister Ma Shu with a talisman net, a spider web of runes and a rain of fire, and together they trapped Mo and 2 of his silver-armored flying zombies, and Gu Wen's sword ran the cultivator clean through. And Mo did not die. A surge of earth caught him, a crack opened in the ground, and the pierced, dying cultivator simply dropped into it and vanished, leaving nothing but a pool of blood where a corpse should have been. Because Immortal Master Mo is not only a cultivator, he is a high feng shui master too, and feng shui masters know tricks with the earth that immortals don't bother to learn. The rebels collapsed at Anping. I stripped Han Qi's armor for a decoy and carried him out south, and on the way, in the trees, I found the answer. A camphor tree with a sword run all the way through its trunk, and a pool of blood at its roots, and no body. And I remembered an old anecdote of Uncle Nine's about a palm print pressed into a tree. Immortal Master Mo had a parasitic technique. When a killing blow lands, he sends the wound sideways, grafts his own fatal damage onto a tree, and walks away from a death that a tree dies for him instead. Gu Wen ran him through, and a camphor tree took the wound, which meant Gu Wen and his senior sister could stab that man 100 times, and he'd just plant 100 forests. To kill Immortal Master Mo, you don't hit him harder. You find the anchor he parks his death in, and you break it first, and then one clean cut finishes a man who spent years believing he can't be finished. I rallied 7,000 routed troops around my little funeral corps, kept my cover intact through the disaster, and buried the mountain of Anping dead, and it carried me to the very doorstep of the Grandmaster realm. 150 years of internal energy, 10,000 caddies of strength, and I filed the parasitic secret away with the rest, on the page marked Immortal Master Mo, right under the page marked Uncle Nine, the man he helped drown. I was inside the rebellion now. I knew the marshal's face, I knew the immortal's weakness, and I had a pass that let me walk anywhere. All that was left was to pull the whole thing down on their heads without a single one of them ever knowing the gravedigger did it. The Anping funerals pushed me over the last wall. 9th tier, divine transformation, the real thing, 6 senses gone sharp enough to feel a man's malice from 10 feet away before he moves. Han Ki got bumped to deputy division commander for surviving the rout, and dragged me up with him to military commander over the funeral corps. I was a 9th tier master running the graveyard of a rebellion, and the rebellion still thought I was a soft-hearted corporal with a shovel, which is exactly when they started hunting for the traitor in their ranks, because a string of defeats that clean does not happen by accident, and their strategist Liu Xuanji was not a fool. My false name made his list. I felt the eyes on me, found my hidden tent marker moved, knew my quarters had been searched, but the only things that could hang me, the 7 Fiends' blade, Gu Wen's communication talisman, were buried miles away under a dead tree, and my face is very calm when it needs to be, so I let them look. A man with nothing to find is the most patient man in the room. They tested me before they trusted me. A rebel dressed as a bloodied Xuanwu spy staggered up to me begging me to smuggle a map through the lines, and I killed him on the spot without a flicker because a stranger's request delivered to my tent is either a real spy handing me credit or a loyalty test handing me a noose, and either way the correct answer is a knife. It was a test. I passed it by being exactly as ruthless as they hoped I wasn't. Then they made me watch a real execution, and the real execution had a face in it from the other end of my whole life. The condemned spy was a Xuanwu man named Shen Yuan, whose family of 7 the rebels had killed, and the marshal used the moment to justify the entire rebellion, and the man he had recite the justification, a young rebel guard, was named Mo Xiaobao, Little Bower, third sister-in-law's son, the boy who left Peach Blossom Village to make his way in the world, the one I blew out the village gate on the horn, the one his mother waited for at the entrance to the village until her hair went white and a snow-laden plum branch came down and took her while she watched an empty road. Here he was. A rebel, reciting a warlord's speech, alive and grown and standing in a camp of murderers, while his mother had died in the snow waiting for him to come home. I didn't say anything. What is there to say? 1,000 years of the poor starving under the great families, and the rebellion promising to fix it. And here was the fixing. A boy who broke his mother's heart standing over a man whose 7 children they'd butchered, everyone certain they were the wronged party. That's the whole war in one courtyard. Nobody's clean, and everybody's grieving, and the graves just keep needing to be dug. Then they finally hauled me in front of the whole leadership to break me. Executioners standing ready, Liu Xuanji sure he had his traitor, and I want you to appreciate how thin the ice was, because immortal Master Mo himself was behind a screen, watching, and Mo can see things ordinary men can't. I played it perfectly stupid. There is a whole art to being interrogated by people who can kill you with a word, and the first rule of it is that a scared innocent man babbles and a guilty one gets careful, so I babbled. I confessed, tearfully, to everything a gravedigger might actually be guilty of. Skimming funeral wine, pocketing a dead man's coins off his cold body before I buried him, breaking 3 good hoes and blaming the rocky ground, I threw myself on the mercy of the court over the hose specifically, at length, until half the deadly circle of officers was fighting down a smile. Make a man laugh and he can't quite bring himself to behead you in the next breath. It's chemistry. Liu Xuanji wasn't laughing. He wanted proof I was the real Ma Cheng, and he had 2 executioners standing by to take the answer out of my neck if he didn't like it, and behind a screen at the back of the tent sat immortal Master Mo, silent, watching, and Mo can see things ordinary men can't. That's the part that had my heart going, not the executioners, the screen. So I gave them the 2 things no imposter could possibly have. First, Ma Cheng's whole life, every cousin and every debt, and the name of the girl who jilted him at 19, because I'd buried the man and a funeral hands me everything he ever was. And second, the trap, the one they were all so sure of. They demanded I show them Ma Cheng's internal energy, the low, worthless, specific flavor of a 4th-tier corporal, the one thing the experts all swore could not be faked because you cannot pretend to be weaker than you are. Except I can. My fusion of a dozen arts let me dial my 9th-tier ocean all the way down to a corporal's muddy little puddle and hold it there, steady, under the eyes of an immortal, while a bead of sweat I could not permit myself to wipe ran down my spine. Mo leaned toward his screen, looked, and found nothing wrong, because there was nothing to find, because the lie was flawless all the way down to the marrow. They called the executioners off and apologized to me. I accepted graciously, sniffling about my hose. And I went back to my graves and moved my buried gear to a fresh dead tree that same night, because a man who's just survived 1 search does not leave anything where the 2nd search will look. Han Qi, grateful I'd survived a hunt he couldn't protect me from, finally told me the secret at the top. The Song family were the fallen dynasty, the old blood the Red Lotus had gathered up to make the rebellion legitimate. But Liu Xuanji and his 4 venerables, water, fire, wind, and thunder, didn't want a Song on the throne. They wanted their pretty puppet, Lin Ji, and every feng shui master in the whole rebel army came out of Liu Xuanji's camp, which meant the Song family had power and blood, but no earth magic of their own. So I handed the Song family an idea that served me far more than it served them. Build your own feng shui camp, I told Han Qi, out of your family's royal yin-yang classics, so you're not beholden to Liu Xuanji for the art. Let me run it. And they did. And running it advanced my own feng shui by leaps, and it got me the one thing I actually wanted out of the entire arrangement, because to properly annotate those ancient royal classics, they brought in the finest feng shui master they had. Immortal Master Mo. Mo's own annotations, in Mo's own hand, on a book that then sat in my camp. A personal item, carrying a piece of the man. Exactly what a feng shui master needs to find and break another one's parasitic anchor. He handed me the key to killing him and thought he was doing homework. The Grand Marshal, meanwhile, quietly silenced Taishan, the Black Wolf boss, for plotting to surrender and gave me the body to bury. I put Taishan in a genuine feng shui treasure spot, and burying a man in earth that good sent a 7-colored light up into me, the land's own blessing, and cracked me through to Tier 3 feng shui master, 1 step from an earth master, 1 step from a man who can move rivers, the way Uncle Nine could, the way Uncle Nine died doing. The final battle assembled itself. The rebels forged silver-armored flying zombies from a blood pool, and Taishan's corpse and Mo's corpse refining art, weapons built to kill the exhausted Taiyi immortals and then take a rebuilt Jiangcheng. They took Changshu County overnight with inside help. The plan was two-pronged, the main force south against the Xuanwu army, and a feng shui formation at Changshu in the north to seal that flank shut. And I needed to be south. South was where Mo would be. South was where I could break his anchor and end him. So of course the marshal ordered Funeral Commissioner Ma Cheng to stay north and build the entire Changshu formation in a single day, or die. Fine. I've been told to do impossible things on deadlines my whole life. I buried a talisman-marked stone in a pit where the formation's heart would sit, and I muttered a very stupid sentence to the empty air. Xiaohei, I really want to eat fish. And somewhere out in the dark, a black dog with a message in his collar heard his cue and went to fetch a certain immortal. The board was set. Every piece I'd spent a year quietly moving was finally close enough to touch. All that was left was to knock them all down at once and walk out of a rebellion nobody would ever know I'd been standing inside of. Changshu fell apart on schedule, just not the way the marshal planned. Liu Xuanji's feng shui fog rolled over the county's defenders and broke them, Deputy Mo going down stuck full of arrows, and the man they'd set to watch me while I built their formation was, of all the people in the world, Jianggu Dragon, the Black Wolf vice leader. The one who wanted to feed my dog to his master a lifetime ago. The reason I killed Master Fan, the top name that had sat unpaid on my ledger longer than almost any other. He watched me carefully. He did not watch my feet. While I stood there looking like a sweating rebel commissioner failing to build a formation, my toe was drawing a talisman in the dirt, linked to the stone I'd buried under the formation's heart, and when I closed the circuit, the whole Changshu formation ate itself. Then I turned around and settled Jianggu Dragon's account, and took his face for a disguise, and walked south out of a collapsing rebel flank, wearing the skin of the man who'd once threatened my dog. The ledger closes its accounts in its own order, but it closes them. South was where Immortal Master Mo was, and south was where a year of work came due. Xiaohei met me in the dark with my real gear, the Seven Fiends blade back in my hand at last, and using Mo's own annotations, the homework he'd done for the Song family, and I'd quietly memorized, I found the thing that made him a god, his parasitic anchor, a stone, seeded with his own essence, where he dumped every killing blow so a rock could die in his place. I wrapped it in gathering evil blood talismans and I broke it, and breaking it didn't just take away his escape hatch, it slammed half of every wound he'd ever parked in it back into his own body, all at once. The immortal who couldn't be killed suddenly had a year of borrowed deaths coming home to collect. Then I fought him, wearing Han Chi's face, and I want to walk you through it because this is the fight I'd been training for since a boy learned White Tiger pounces on the enemy against empty air on a mountain nobody watched. He came up out of that broken anchor already dying, and still the most dangerous thing I had ever faced. Half a year of borrowed deaths were all coming home at once, and he was furious about the bill. He raised a tortoise-shell shield, a real immortal treasure. I brought the Seven Fiends blade down on it with saber chi and split it like a walnut and took his arm off at the shoulder. He didn't even slow. He flung 7 soul-scattering nails at my heart, 7 black needles built to shred a man's soul, and my iron-clad golden bell gauze swallowed everyone. He spat corpse poison. I turned my face out of it. He called down the crimson flame, and the fire washed over my golden silk vest and found nothing to burn. On paper, this was suicide. He was a chi-refining immortal, an actual rung of the ladder above anything a rootless grandmaster has any business touching. On paper, I lose this fight 10 times out of 10, but I have never once fought on paper. I fight the way a funeral man fights, which means I don't come alone. I bring everyone I have ever buried into the room with me, so I stopped trading blows. I put every card face up on the table at once. 5 divine power blood talismans slapped onto my own body in a single breath. 5 lives worth of my essence spent to spike my strength past anything my rank should hold. The second revolution of the blood fiend art, roaring up my spine. And on top of all of it, the soul-shattering saber intent, the one that says I sever the shackles of the mortal world. I first felt that intent cutting a stone pillar under the moon, in a grief I hadn't known what to do with. I knew exactly what to do with it now. I put the whole thing into one cut. His last shield was a Vajra talisman, the kind that turns a mountain aside. It held for exactly as long as it takes a shield to shatter. And Immortal Master Mo, the drowner of Zhongcheng, the man who fed 100,000 souls into an alchemy to make a beautiful boy a king, the man who sent my master's death sideways into a river and walked away from it smiling, did not get up. I thought about Uncle Nine while I did it. I want that on the record. Not rage exactly, just the arithmetic finally balancing. One gentle old exorcist, one single step from a power he'd chased his whole life, and he spent that step to turn a river off 100,000 strangers. This was the man who made him pay it. The account was square now. It didn't bring him back. Squaring an account never does. But you close it anyway, because leaving it open is worse. Except he had one trick left, because his kind always do. His head came off his falling body and flew, a flying head technique, still alive, spitting a mouthful of poison blood at my face as it went. And here is where 20 years of instinct earns its keep. Because I didn't think, I just finished. my body already moving before my mind caught up, and Xiao He launched off the ground and took the flying head out of the air and pinned it, and I destroyed it. The immortal who couldn't die, died. It took a broken anchor, 5 talismans, 2 arts, a divine sword, a dog, and every reflex I owned, but it counts. He's on the closed side of the ledger now, right under my master's name. And then, standing over him, I got the reward I'd been hunting since the day Gu Wen told me I had no spiritual root and could never walk the immortal path. I buried him. Properly, sincerely, because a sincere funeral pays better and because the horn doesn't know how to lie. The panel opened, and it was the richest thing I'd ever read. Mo Wuchang, disciple of the blood fiend demon sect, the immortal the whole Red Lotus worshipped, chi refining tier 7 and a tier 3 feng shui master besides, life experience plus 250,000. And in the options, glowing gold, the thing I'd wanted more than any technique in the world, a fire spiritual root. I padded his attendance up over 90% with a proper vigil, opened both doors, and I took it. Fire spiritual root plus 3, and the moment it settled into me, something turned over in my chest that had been dead my whole life, a channel opening, a door I'd been told was walled shut for me forever swinging quietly open. I could cultivate immortality now. The man born with no root had buried a root and taken it. I took the Crimson Flame technique with it, a real immortal art and a corpse-raising manual, and off his body a sealed storage pouch I didn't dare open yet, a purple talisman, blood pills, another lotus token, and a vest of golden silk that turns divine weapons. I'd spent my whole life climbing the martial road because the immortal road was closed to me, and the man who drowned my master, dying, handed me the key to it. There's a kind of justice in that the world almost never lets you have, where the same stroke that avenges the person you loved also gives you the future they wanted for you. I don't get many of those. I stood over Immortal Master Mo's grave with my master's killer buried and my master's dreams suddenly, impossibly open in front of me, and I let myself feel both of those things at once, the way I've always been able to. Grief and a door opening. A closed account and a new road. But I wasn't finished. A rebellion still had a grand marshal in it, wearing the face of an old bookseller, and I had 3 heads I'd promised to lay at an empty grave. The rebellion came apart the way a rope comes apart once you've cut the core strands, all at once, and faster than anyone expects. I killed Scarface Masi at last, the bird keeper who'd pointed a pigeon at me a lifetime ago. I framed the dead Jianggu dragon for the Changshu disaster, and the surviving rebel leaders scattered into the mountains blaming each other, and I followed them into the dark and helped them lose. I spared exactly one of them, Han Chi, my commander, because in a whole rebellion of monsters, he'd been a genuinely decent man who buried his soldiers and shielded a gravedigger from the executioners, and I've never been able to kill a good boss. I hid him in a hollow tree and left him alive. And then I put on the face of Shu Fan one more time and I hunted down Grand Marshal Han He, the black market bookseller, the fallen king, and I collected him too. I took 3 heads back to an empty grave, Immortal Master Mo who drowned the city and my master with it. Han He, the marshal who spent 100,000 souls as reagents, the crooked old bookseller who started this whole cult chasing a talisman boy called Shu Fan, and He Ping, the water venerable, who'd helped burn 18 borrowed lifespans to turn a river out of its bed. The walk up to the cenotaph was quiet. There was no body under it, just a broken peachwood sword and a scrap of robe, but I'd built it properly, on high ground, in good earth, the way he'd have built it himself. I set the 3 heads down in a row in front of it, in the order they'd earned their places. I lit the incense, and I told him, "It's done, Ninth Uncle. The immortal who took you is dead. The marshal is dead. The rebellion is finished. The city holds. I promised you over this grave that I'd bury every last one of them myself, and I have. And here they are." And then, quieter, the part that wasn't a report. "You gave me a home when I had none, and a trade, and a father, and a second road up the mountain when the first one was closed to me. You made me swear never to use what you taught me for evil, and I've bent that oath into some strange shapes, old man, but I never broke it, not really. Rest now. I've got it from here." I went home to the living after that, to a joyful welcome, to Gao Hai shouting my name, and to Shen Ru, round and fierce and so close to her time, my master's widow carrying my master's child, and I buried the rebel leaders one after another, and the rewards were mountains, king's blood and venerable's arts, and somewhere in that flood of send-offs, my body crossed the last line of the mortal world and broke into the innate true chi realm. A grandmaster, the thing Mr. Lin warned a village boy about 20 years ago like it was the ceiling of heaven, and I was standing on it, and above it now there was only the immortal path which was finally open to me. So I opened it. I sat down and cultivated the Crimson Flame technique with my brand new fire spiritual root, and the fire caught, and the record turned a 3rd page inside me, and I stepped onto the very first rung of the immortal ladder. Chi refining, tier 1. A homeless Swana boy who died staying up too late in another world entirely, standing at the bottom of the stairway to the immortals, having climbed every other stair the long way, on foot, through the mud, one dead man at a time. Shenru's son came a little after, a healthy boy, and we named him Kui Xiaozhuo. And per his father's last wishes, I swore he'd be raised to the righteous path and never, ever taught the feng shui arts. Every craft has its doom. Uncle Nine didn't want his son to pay the price he paid. The legacy would live, but it would live in me, and this child would just get to be a child and then a good man, and that was the whole point of everything his father ever did. That's what the old men keep dying for if you strip it all down, so the next kid gets to just be a kid. And then, because a promise is a promise and I keep every single one of them, I paid off the oldest debt on my ledger. You remember the very first night, a skinny stray and a starving boy in a leaking shack and a cold little vow. 100 years from now we're going to dig up their graves. Well, it didn't take 100 years. I went and I dug up every last one of them. The He family, the Fan family, Tai Shan and Mao Hai Dragon and the traitor Xiao Branch, Inspector Unshu Xin, who chained me at the gate. Every ancestral grave of every name that had ever earned a line in that book, dug up and relocated far away, their old bones given a cheap burial mixed in with pig bones, which for families that proud is a fate worse than any blade. All across Jiangcheng they whispered about it, terrified. The legend of Shu Fan, the gravedigger, the masked terror who desecrates the ancestors of the wicked, which I want to point out is a wildly unfair way to describe a man simply keeping a promise he'd made to a dog on the worst night of his life. 100 years, I'd told that skinny stray. We'll dig up their graves and we'll take our time. I just came in ahead of schedule. Xiao Hei trotted beside me through every graveyard with his notebook, crossing names off the ledger with the grim satisfaction of a creditor at the end of a very long year, and when the human names ran out, he refused to stop. He insisted, and I swear to you every word of this is true, on personally settling accounts with a carp in a temple pond that had once slapped him across the face with its tail, and with an entire family of mice who had, over the years, eaten their way through his beloved collection of comic books. I helped him relocate the carp and evict the mice. I did not ask questions. The dog kept a grudge book for 2 lifetimes and never once let a single line go unpaid. And honestly, of the 2 of us, I've never been entirely sure which one taught the other how to hold a grudge. He'd earned his revenge. We both had. Last of all, I took Kunyu, the bronze corpse that wore my friend Erlong's stolen strength, and I laid him down for good in a true feng shui treasure spot, in earth as good as I could find, so that the huge sweet kid who only ever wanted to be a hero could finally rest somewhere gentle instead of following me through one more war. Rest, Brother Mang. You were my hero. The story just took the long way around to saying so. Then I got on a boat, with my dog and my horn and a wine gourd on my hip holding a dead friend's last promise, and I left. I stood at the rail and watched Jiangcheng slide away behind me in the mist, the drowned wall and the rebuilt streets and the graves. So many graves, the whole absurd, brutal, beautiful chapter of a life I'd lived here. I came to this city, a starving nobody, in a body that had just been beaten to death, with a cracked pot and a grudge and a dog. I left it an immortal grandmaster who'd buried a rebellion, avenged 3 fathers, and taken the first step up a stairway I was born too rootless to climb. Down in the mud, where the mistakes don't kill you, I'd said, all those years ago. Build the base. Wait. The base was built. The waiting was over. Somewhere up north, an old drunk's granddaughter was owed a dowry and a story about the grandfather she never met. And somewhere past her the immortal world was waiting, the real one, with its sex and its cultivators and its dangers that made a grandmaster look like a village bully. And a man born with no root was finally, impossibly, on his way up to meet all of it, with everyone he'd ever loved either safe behind him or riding along inside a book that pays in the lives of the dead. The apricot blossoms were coming down over the river, the way they used to come down over a plum tree in a village a whole lifetime ago. Misty rain on the water, the Suona on my back and the road opening ahead. Farewell, I thought, apricot blossoms and misty rain of Jiangnan. And farewell to those absurd years. The road opening ahead opened first onto a wedding, the worst kind. I'd brought Shenru and the baby along north for the first stretch, on my way to keep Old Mo's promise, and we stopped at a river town called Sanhe, and Sanhe was throwing a Dragon King's wedding, which sounds festive until you see the bride. She was bound and gagged and weeping, the Mo family's only daughter, chosen by lottery, and the whole town was drumming and wailing as they carried her down to the water. For 20 years, they told me, a dragon king in the river, a spirit monster, had demanded 1 bride a year, and the year they didn't deliver, it capsized every boat and drowned the town's whole livelihood. So every year they tied up a girl and gave her to the river and called it a wedding so they could stand to do it. Shenru looked at me with her sharp, kind eyes and did not have to say anything at all. I sighed. I'll look tomorrow, I told her. Within my abilities, no promises. I always say no promises. I always end up keeping them anyway. Somebody beat me to it. When they carried the bride to the water the next night, a cloaked figure was already waiting and stepped up and volunteered to take the girl's place and got tied to the altar in her stead. And I thought, well, there's a hero with worse instincts than mine, right up until the offerings hit the water and I realized the volunteer had poisoned every dish on the altar first. Clever. A giant python surged up out of the river, swallowed the poisoned offerings whole, and a white tiger came out of nowhere, and the cloaked figure burst the ropes, and the two of them, swordswoman and tiger, opened that python up like a New Year's parcel. Not a damsel, a trap, with a girl for bait and a poisoner running it. But it was the wrong monster. The python was just the Dragon King's pet. The Dragon King itself came up behind her, a one-horned black-scaled thing the size of a barge, so close to becoming a true dragon you could feel it in your teeth, and it nearly took her head off before she'd finished congratulating herself. Her poison barely slowed it. Her sword skidded off its scales. She was good, genuinely good, and she was about to die anyway, because sometimes good just isn't the size of the problem. So I put my mask on. Shu Fan rides again. I flung a fistful of quicklime straight into that thing's eyes. It's not a technique any manual teaches. It's just what you do when a monster has eyes and you happen to have lime, and a near dragon shrieking and thrashing with a face full of caustic powder is a much more manageable near dragon than the alternative. Then I snatched the swordswoman out from under its jaws. I'll admit the extraction lacked a certain grace. There was a moment involving a leg and an arm and a very undignified amount of momentum that she and I have since agreed by mutual treaty never to discuss again, and I'll thank you not to bring it up either. I hauled her clear, dumped her behind a rock, and got to work. Because I don't fight things bigger than me, I trap them. I'd read that riverbank the whole afternoon before, the way I read every ground I might have to bleed on, and I'd buried my armor-piercing crossbow at the one spot the monster would have to cross to reach the town, so I danced. Blind and enraged, it chased the sound of me, and I led it, light-footed on the soaring art, right over the trigger, and a rune-tipped bolt punched up through the one soft seam under that horn, while Xiaohei darted in and out of its blind spots, keeping it turned exactly where I wanted it. Then I came down the Seven Fiends' blade through the wound the bolt had opened, while the Dragon King was still trying to understand why the world had gone dark and full of quicklime. A creature one breath from becoming a true dragon, dead in a riverbank mudflat, killed by a bag of lime and a hidden crossbow and a divine sword, in that exact order of importance. The sword got the credit. The lime did the work. That's usually how it goes with me. I found what the river had swallowed for 20 years down in its lair, the bones of 20 brides, and I gave every one of them the funeral nobody had dared to give them, because a girl handed to a monster and called a wife still deserves a horn over her grave. And I took from the same lair a blood dragon stone, dense with the kind of evil chi that pushes a fresh cultivator up the early rungs. The town got its river back. The Mo girl got to grow up. And a masked man in a funeral robe walked off before anyone could thank him, which is exactly how the legend of Shu Fan the hero started spreading up and down the northern road, told, loudest of all, by a cloaked swordswoman who could not stop talking about the man who'd pulled her out of a dragon's mouth. She had no idea he was also the funeral man traveling the same road she was. Neither did I know yet who she was. I just knew she was reckless and lethal, and she carried a white tiger like a house cat. And she looked at the empty spot where her rescuer had vanished with an expression I recognized because it was the same one I'd worn 100 times looking at a debt I intended to repay. I only figured out who she was a few towns later when I finally reached the village on Old Mo's map to keep the promise a dead man threw me off a mountain to make sure I'd keep. The village on the map was Zhangjia, and the granddaughter Old Mo had never dared to meet had a birth surname of Shi, and when they finally brought her out to receive her dead grandfather's keepsake from a traveling funeral man, it was her, the swordswoman from the river. The one who'd poisoned a Dragon King's dinner and gotten pulled out of its jaws by a masked stranger, Hua Ling. Old Mo, the lame drunk who hauled corpses in a mortuary, had been Long Fei Hu the Nine Dragon Blade, and he'd married a woman named Hua Hong, the saintess of the Southern Five Poison sect, a legend in her own right, and this reckless lethal girl with the white tiger was what their bloodline produced. Of course she poisoned the offerings. It was in her from both sides. I gave her the red wine gourd, the dowry the old man guarded for 20 years and pressed into my hands with his last strength. There was a hidden compartment inside it, and in the compartment was everything he'd never gotten to give her in person. 10,000 tales and notes, a letter, a cultivation manual, and a marrow cleansing pill, and a last request, written in a dead man's hand, that his granddaughter be married to the young man carrying the gourd, to He-Han, to me, the old fox. He'd decided I was the grandson-in-law he wanted on a snowy New Year's Eve over a jar of Daughter's Red, and then he'd made it official from beyond the grave and thrown me off a mountain to make sure I'd hand-deliver the proposal to his granddaughter myself. I stood there holding an arranged marriage written by a man who died for me to a woman who'd already caught my eye getting eaten by a dragon, and any other story would have ended right there with a wedding. But I'm immortal, and she was mortal, and I've buried enough people to know exactly how that math goes. So I didn't take it. And she, it turned out, didn't want it either, for the best possible reason. She declined her grandfather's arrangement gently, and when they pressed her why, she flushed and admitted there was already someone. A masked man. A stranger who'd pulled her out of a dragon's mouth on the northern road and vanished before she could even thank him. She was turning down a marriage to He Han because she was busy pining for Shu Fan, and she had absolutely no idea they were the same tired man standing in front of her holding her grandfather's gourd. I did not clear that up. I traded her grandmother's 5 Poisons classic off the family instead and prepared to slip away quietly, a poison manual for a beauty, a fair trade for a man with no time for a wife. And then her white tiger, who is smarter than most people, walked a slow circle around me, sniffed, and announced to the whole room that this funeral fellow smelled exactly like the masked rescuer. Shu Fan, caught by a cat. She chased me down. Of course she did. She's got the 9 dragon blade and a poison saintess in her blood. She was never going to just let me walk off twice. We watched the Lantern Festival together, in the end, because Shenru threatened me if I didn't. Lanterns going up the Black River, fireworks opening over the water, and the two of us being spectacularly awkward. Me making small talk about how my dog can do a backflip, which is true, and is somehow the only fact about myself I could produce under fire. And I told her the truth, because she'd earned the truth, that I'd started up a road she couldn't follow, that I was going to outlive everyone in every room I ever walked into, and that loving a mortal, for me, was just signing up to bury one more person I couldn't stand to lose. I'd told Uncle Nine's widow to remarry rather than mourn a corpse. I wasn't going to hand Hua Ling the same grief from the other direction. But she's a cultivator, and that changes the whole equation, and we both knew it. So I gave her the only honest thing I had. Reach the immortal path, I told her. Climb it. If you make it up there where I'm going, then the lifespans match, and the math works, and maybe we meet again on the far side of it. That's the only promise I can make you. It's a hard one. She looked at me the way she'd looked at the empty spot where her rescuer vanished, and she made me the promise back. Then I'll become an immortal, she said. However long it takes, and I'll find you. Not a girl asking to be saved. A woman announcing an intention, the same flat certainty I use on my own ledger. She meant it. I could tell she meant it. And that's a dangerous thing to hand a man who spent 2 lifetimes learning that patient people always get what they're patient for. Shenru, watching the whole thing from the side with the baby on her hip, leaned over and told me I smelled like a girl, which is her way of saying she approved, and then she got serious for 1 second. Don't flee it, she said. Don't do what Nine almost did to me. He nearly wasted both our lives being too careful to be happy. Don't you dare make that same mistake, He Han. I didn't promise her anything, but I didn't say no either. I got back on the boat the next morning and went on north, alone with my dog and my horn, toward the immortal world that had been a top shelf in a village schoolteacher's lecture 20 years and a whole rebellion ago. Behind me, a woman was already turning her whole life toward that same distant shelf, for no better reason than that a masked stranger pulled her out of a river and told her the only way to see him again was to climb. I came into this world as a corpse on a dirt floor with a cracked pot and a grudge and a dog. And I was leaving the mortal half of it as a grandmaster on the first rung of the immortal ladder, with 3 fathers avenged, a rebellion buried, a legacy carried, and apparently, somewhere behind me on the road, a girl with a tiger climbing a mountain to catch up. The Swona on my back, the mist on the river, and up ahead, past the last of the mortal towns, the real climb starting at last. The mortal world had been the easy part, I just hadn't found that out yet.